Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the SAU Governing Board on October 14th, 2021 to order at 6:01. Welcome. The SAU Governing Board is a combination of each one of our districts, the Hollis School District, the Brookline School District, and the Cooperative School District, coming together to do the business of running the SAU office or working with the administration to work with the SAU office. So welcome. I need an appointment of a process observer. Anyone? Oh, thank you, Erin. It's super fun. You're going to love it. You're probably going to want to do it. Thank you.
I'll make sure
Hi, Tom. Do we have any agenda adjustments?
I have a couple of pieces of information that I wanted to share with the board. The first one is we have a retirement at the SAU. Dear Superintendent Corey, with excitement and a little sadness, I am announcing my effective retirement June 30th, 2020. After 23 years at SAU41, it is time to move on to the next adventures in life. Spending more time with our two grandchildren is one of those adventures Joyce and I plan to embrace. I will be forever grateful for the privilege of having worked at the SAU41 school district. I would like to thank Superintendent Corey and the SAU41 central office staff who have made every day a pleasure to work and be part of an amazing team. I would also like to thank all the elected officials, building administrators, building staff, and for their support and friendship over the last 23 years. That is from Rich Raymond, who, as you all know, has taken us from basically no technology to where we are today. Just a couple of things. When he started, we had a handful of laptop cards that had Wi-Fi. We had no security. We had no internet filtering. Across the entire SAU in 1999, we had 400 devices. And it's about 2,200 devices on a daily basis. He's moved all our databases from single silos to cloud-based. He brought email to the district. And it's funny to think about that. Pretty much, we used the phone and we talked to each other. We did not have a website presence when he started. And our staffing, there was him and two technical specialists. Now we have a director of technology, a network coordinator, and 4 technical specialists. So in 23 years, we've doubled our staff for technology. I want to personally thank him for all his efforts and everything he has done for the SAU. Those of you who know Rich realize that there are many weekends that he was in literally pulling the cables and doing all of the pieces that typically don't go under the IT director's job. So I want to thank him, and I need a motion from somebody to accept, with regrets, his retirement.
And appreciation.
Yeah. So moved.
Beth? So moved. Second?
Second.
Okay. Okay. Beth,
You don't need to be that aggressive about it.
we appreciate it, Laura. All those in favor? I'm sorry. You know what? I totally forgot before we go any further. Again, I'm very rusty at this. I need to get members Kellner and Roy are participating electronically. So in accordance with the right to know, I need them individually to state for the record where they are, why their attendance in person was not reasonably practical, who, if anyone, is with them, and whether or not they are able to hear the proceedings. Can we start with Amy, please?
Yep, this is Amy Kellner. I am participating electronically from my home due to a sick child, and I am alone in the room and I can hear the proceedings.
Great, thank you. And Carol?
Carol, yeah.
Hi, this is Carol Roy. I'm participating electronically this evening due to an injury, so I couldn't come to the building tonight. I am alone in the room and I can hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. So in order to vote on our motion for Rich, we need to do it roll call. So I'm going to start with Beth, if I could, please.
Sure. Beth, aye. Kate, aye.
Holly, aye.
Cindy, aye. Krista, aye.
Jen, aye.
Becky, aye. Erin, aye.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, aye. Tammy, aye. Amy, go ahead.
Amy, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Rich, for all of your incredible commitment and dedication to the district. Okay?
He was. He certainly
Two other pieces. One, I'd like to add a discussion on the deliberations. Dawn McMahon is our recording secretary. She has sent me a letter. It has been a number of years since we last looked at Dawn's hourly wage for doing her minutes. So I'd like to do that during deliberations tonight. So we can make a decision on that. And the last piece of information, I just wanted to let the SAU board know that Billy Richards, Paul Tyler's, Julian's, and Kelly's work will inform this week that we will be receiving a $214,890 grant to enhance our technology capabilities, basically to bring us to a one-on-one initiative that is coming through the same corporation that we get our email through. So I want to thank them publicly and recognize them for all their efforts. And it was kind of amazing to open the email. As you know, most of our ESSER funds have been substantially below other districts because it's calculated on your free and reduced lunch. So this was an opportunity to do something for our students, and those 4 individuals took the ball and ran with it. What will be happening is that dollar amount we divided by district based on what we put into the grant, and we'll be bringing that to each of the boards to approve that at the individual board level. I just wanted to recognize that while we are together tonight.
Great, thank you very much. It's great news.
And then lastly, I just wanted to, our next meeting is scheduled for December 16th. Typically, we try to have the SAE budget done and formally approved by the 15th. We're asking for a one-day adjustment this year to the 16th to meet the schedules of all the various boards. So that is our scheduled date. It has been on the calendar, but I just wanted to make you aware. Typically, we have to have the budget done by the 15th, but with everything going on and the number of other meetings in December, we're just asking to do the public hearing in those pieces at the 16th.
Could it be at CSDA?
I believe that will be.
The 16th, for the, on the 16th, okay, thank you.
And that's it for my update.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to public input. I ask that we keep the public input to 3 minutes. We welcome anyone to come speak if I am going to ask to speak on anything on the agenda. So if anyone is interested.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Wilder, and I live at 48 Pierce Lane in Hollis. I came here tonight with something prepared that I wanted to talk to you all about, and when I looked around the room and saw the diversity of the different boards that were represented, I found that I was going to step away from what I have prepared and go off the cuff. There's many things that I've seen in tonight's agenda that are very concerning to me. The first one being, I guess, first I would mention the buses. I'm still, and I think, if any of you don't know, I have 5 children. 3 of them I'm currently homeschooling, and 2 of them are in the high school. I believe that the masks are child abuse. I believe that what you're doing to them is stifling their growth, and you're stopping them from being able to build relationships in a proper manner. I believe that by Mr. Corey telling the bus company that they needed to require them on the buses, that he's overstepping his power, and that you should give that power back over to the buses. I have looked online, and I've looked at the CDC recommendations, and I feel that this board and all the boards are being driven by the federal funding that they're being granted through this COVID process. We've been living in this for over a year and a half, almost 2 years. I don't know what your experience is with COVID, but I've known many people that have gotten it and gotten over it, some of them hospitalized, but the only one that I know that has passed away from it was 90-plus years old in a nursing home. On the other note, in that same time, I've lost over half a dozen people that I love, from cancer, from old age, from accidents, from heart attacks. So I would like each one of you to take a moment and really think about the effect that you want to leave on these children when you look back in 5 or 10 years on COVID. I understand that you believe that you're keeping them safe, but it is your job to make sure that they get a good education. I'm not concerned about the social and emotional well-being that you have and you want to teach my children. That is my job, and that is the parents' job. It is not the school's job. And I watched the video, and I watched all the ideas that you came up with. And my concern is that my understanding is that these things aren't even happening. And our children are drowning because of everything that's going on. If you can't see the separation that happens when you cover their face, or you separate them, or you don't allow them to build relationships that are fundamental, important years of their life that they will never get back, I am asking for you to think about the children that you love in your childhood and all of the people in your life that you know, how these things have affected them. I also have a problem with worrying about increasing budgets and hiring people when we're already spending so much on paid positions right now, when you want to put in basically a PR adding another level of us losing transparency. And that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for you to educate my children. I'm asking for you to allow me to be the one that makes their decisions as their parent and what I want for their social and emotional well-being. And I would like you to give the parental responsibilities back to us and stop putting these kids in a box. These are their lives. I really hope you consider what I said and that you understand what's going on in our nation and in our state. 9 people got arrested last night at a meeting that they're voting on a budget for $23 million, and they didn't do anything. So if you can't see that we're turning into a police state and you are on a board that has the opportunity to give our freedoms back to us, I really would like you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Craig, and on Saturday, I will have lived in Hollis for 2 months. I live at 17 Hills Farm Lane, and I just, after an exhaustive search since March, up and down the East Coast, we said New Hampshire. New Hampshire's the place. We were escaping Massachusetts. And I thought this would be promised land, live free or die. I figured, this is how you guys operate. It's the state motto. And, choose if you want to wear a mask, go for it. If you don't. So I guess there's 2 things I just want to say very quickly. One, I want to thank the Hollis Brookline School Board because they did it right. They came together and they did mask optional, and it made my life coming here after all of the searching we did online for houses. and landing in Hollis, and it's such a beautiful town. I knew nothing about Hollis before I came here. I'm from Winthrop, Massachusetts, so right on the water, crowded, noisy, airplanes. And this to me is God's country. It's beautiful. So I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy that I can drop my son Ryan off, who's a freshman, and there's no mask. It's heaven. It's heaven. My son Declan, who is 6th grade, not so much. And I wanted to homeschool him. I'm a stay-at-home mom. So I said, I'll homeschool him. And my husband said, no way. No, they're new to the town. We're new to the state. They don't have friends. He's got to go to school. He's got to socialize. It's hard to socialize when all you can see are people's eyes. Now, I know they take them off at recess and at lunch, but live free or die. You know, I think it should be, if you want to send your kid to school in a mask, do it. If a child gets COVID, we know the statistics. Everybody likes to say follow the science, right? If you follow the science, it's a 99.997% chance that they're going to survive COVID. And I'll take those odds. And I think both parents would. And I think if you ask the kids, they would take them too. If a teacher said, we have a test tomorrow, and you can study or not, but there's a 99.997% chance you're going to get an A, whether or not you study, I can bet all those kids would go home and just play video games and hang out and watch TV, right? Those are really good odds. So what I'm asking is, mask optional, you know? We know what's best for our kids. We're all trying to do what's best for our families. I moved here for that sole reason of live free or die. And I really want to believe that as a school district, SAU41 can put those words into action. The other thing is I drive them to school every day. They're new, they're scared, they're very shy boys. So I said I would drive them. But the other factor in driving them is they're not riding the bus with masks. It's just another place that they have to wear a mask. And I said, no way. So, you know, I don't know how many other parents out there feel the same way I do. And maybe they're not sending their kids on the bus because they have to wear a mask. But something to consider, you know, if you're going over the bus contracts. So that's it. Thank you. And
Thank you.
That could have been ugly or funny. Fred Hubert, 68 Hideaway Lane in Hollis. First, I want to thank you guys. I know what it's like to be on these boards and put in the countless hours of your time. I want to thank the co-op board for making masks optional. I want to ask the members of the other two boards to talk amongst yourselves. Talk to the other boards. Talk to your superintendent, right? I get these emails because we're in SAU41 about positive cases at CSDA, positive cases at HPS, middle school, high school, and guess what? We're over 2 months in now, and there's not crazy outbreaks at the high school because nobody's wearing masks, and there's not crazy outbreaks at the elementary schools because they are. So I don't know what you guys are doing, but shame on you for making those kids wear masks, okay? I don't have any kids in the elementary school districts anymore, but it breaks my heart to see that happening, and I'm really disappointed with the Hollis board and the Brookline board for doing that to them.
Anyone else? Okay, we will close public input, and we will move on to the approval of minutes with The change is that in each instance, the following amendments, in each instance, it appears remove the hyphen between Durlo and Babcock. And page 6, line 14, replace that with the. And members Brown, Roy, and Williams were absent, so they have to abstain. May I get a motion to approve the minutes from May 13th, 2021?
So moved.
Cindy, Tom seconded. Again, any questions, Tom?
I noticed that throughout the regular minutes, in several instances, the positions of board members on their individual boards were used sporadically. And I think for clarity, in the minutes for the SAU governing board, it would be best to consistently, if you're going to use it, only use the chair, vice chair, so much titles relating to the governing board, because it got a little confusing when they were, for instance, when they were referring to Tammy as chairman. I was thinking, was this from before the vote took place? And then I recall that she's chair of Hollis. So I just asked it for clarity that the minutes, if they're going to use titles, to only use the titles that are in force.
Apply to
for
the
governing
SAU,
board.
right, okay, okay. All right,
Thank you.
that's a good advice, thank you. Anything else? Okay, roll call vote, starting with Beth.
Williams abstained.
Okay.
Kate, aye. Holly, aye. Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Rob, aye.
Ken, aye.
Becky, aye.
Erin, I.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, I.
Tammy, aye.
Amy, aye. Carol, abstain.
Okay, thank you. All right. Moving on to our transportation discussion, and we have Mr. Jeff.
Excuse me, there's a non-public minutes also.
I'm sorry, thank you. See, I'm telling you, rusty. Okay.
Sorry.
May I get a motion to approve the non-public minutes from May 13th, 2021? Motion by Tom.
Yep.
Cindy, second. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Kate, aye. Holly, aye. Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Rob, aye.
Ken, aye.
Becky, aye.
Erin, I.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, I. Tammy, I.
Amy, aye.
Carol.
Carol, abstain. I was there for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeff, I apologize for doing that to you. I'm so sorry.
Well, Jeff is getting to the microphone. For those of you who don't know, Jeff is the regional manager for STA for our region. I'd like to thank Jeff and commend him. During our bus contract that we're presently in, he has always been responsive, quickly getting back to us with any answers to any questions we may have. And I also want to thank him for giving up his time tonight, along with Jen, our dispatcher, who's also here, to kind of talk a little bit about the bus contract and then maybe answer any questions you may have. So I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Good evening. Thank you, Andy. Again, my name is Jeff Finfrock. I'm the area manager for the state of New Hampshire for Student Transportation of America. And tonight I brought with me Jen Berlier, who is our terminal manager. And if there's any questions that I can't answer, I'm sure Jen probably can. So I was asked to be here tonight because of the bus contract, and I wanted to hit on a couple of topics so you have an opportunity to get to know us. And I believe, obviously, being a contracted service, the one issue or the major issue is how we perform. And as you know, in this day and age, I'm sure you've seen all the newspapers and all the national news about school bus drivers and how there is an unbelievable shortage out there, and how I believe nationally it's about 24% of the drivers. So if you have 100 drivers to run your school district, you'd have 24 empty buses. I'm happy to report, through a lot of work and effort, primarily through Jen, we have a full complement here in SAU41. It's been a long road. We've trained, we work diligently training, recruiting, and we strive for perfection. We want to be perfect. We want to do the best job we possibly can. We want to make tomorrow better than today. And I think a lot of that has to do with building relationships. And building relationships, obviously in transportation, there's going to be issues. There's going to be concerns. We know that. We know we're never going to be perfect, but we're going to do our best to get there. And to build those relationships, we need help. We need help with, from school boards. We need help from Andy and administrators. And I compliment Jen, and I say that publicly because Jen has done an unbelievable job building relationships here. She's built relationships with all the building principals, with the athletic director, with Kelly in the finance world, and then of Andy and all the other administrators whenever there's been a problem. And what's been nice about it is if we have a problem or recognize a problem, we have a voice, our ears that we can come to, and the district listens to us. They help us out with our problems, just the same as if the districts or the schools have a problem with us, they come to us, and collectively we're able to work through these things. And it's been a great relationship. It's hard for me to believe we're starting our third year here. As many of you may or may not know, we bought Hollis Transportation. So we were given the contract that's currently in place now and are following that. And obviously tonight you're going to talk about the bus contract, and you all have copies of that. I talk about having enough drivers. Well, that could change that quick. Could change at a drop of a hat. And we know that we have to constantly do our job being out there and recruiting. So as a company, we have hired 2 full-time recruiters. They've been working for probably the last year and a half just in the state of New Hampshire. So in a lot of the ways that we advertise and go out and recruit drivers, of course there's always the mass media. There's the Facebooks and the Indeeds, the Craigslist, Instagram, and any of the other social medias that you can think of. We do our best to advertise on those. You'll see locally that we put yard signs, the little signs for maybe when you're running for to be elected, you put a sign in somebody's yard. We have those signs that we put out there. We try to attend community events and pass out applications. We go to job fairs. In some areas, we park a bus and we put a banner where we're permitted that has our number and how you can reach us and how we can get you to come work for us. And then, of course, we always go to the state unemployment office on a regular basis, check in, get a list of candidates, we make presentations, and so we do our best there. And then there's the financial side of it. We offer the paid training. We pay for everything as far as their credentials, drug testing, etc. At the end of the year, every month and again at the end of the year, we pay attendance bonuses to our employees. If they come to a meeting, and we have safety meetings every month, we pay those folks for that. And then, of course, we have the annual pay increases, which is another way that we do our recruiting. So that is a big part of what we do because we have a great workforce over there. They're very dedicated. They love the kids they transport. You can talk to any one driver, and any time they come in, they talk about my kids. It's not your kids, they're my kids. So the minute that these drivers get to know these people, they get to know these kids or try to get to know these kids. You know, the younger ones are a lot easier to get to know than the older ones because the older ones sometimes don't want, they just want to go to school. But we try to do that, and we try to build relationships and provide your students with on-time, safe transportation. It's reliable. And we've been able to do that so far this year, knock on wood. A couple other things I want to touch on is fleet. When we first purchased Hollis Transportation, there were a number of older vehicles. So instantly we brought in 11 newer buses. Being a bigger company, we have the luxury sometimes that maybe we lose a contract somewhere else, and that we can bring those buses in a repurposed fleet. So we bring those in. 4 of those buses, well, most of the buses were 71 passengers. 4 of the buses were 77 passengers, and that allows us to transport more students at a time, and hopefully being able to reduce the number of buses, therefore the cost to the district. In New Hampshire, STA has 13 locations. And there's a benefit to that. It used to be a benefit back in the day is when everybody had drivers, if you had a multitude of field trips and whatnot, and another terminal didn't have much going on that day, they could send a driver. And we still do that. In fact, we've used people from here to go to other terminals to help out because in other instances, we're not as fortunate as we are here. So there's that, the ability to use those drivers in other locations. And also to bring them here whenever maybe there's a multitude of field trips or whatnot, we can bring people here. We have a maintenance department that we do on-site maintenance, but if we get into a position where we have, because we have one mechanic, if he needs an extra set of hands, we can pull a mechanic in from Merrimack. We can pull a mechanic in from Londonderry or wherever else. We have locations that can help out Lionel and get the vehicles up and running so they're in as close to perfect condition to ensure the safe transportation for your students. And then, of course, our buses. We have the ability to bring in buses should the need be. On any given day, if you have a multitude of trips and we would say we have a couple in that we're working on and we need spare buses, we can pull those buses in from other locations. So that helps out to be able to service the district as close to perfection as we possibly can. So that is really just, I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time. I, again, appreciate being able to come here and speak. We appreciate the last 2 years and the start of the 3rd year. I feel it's been a great relationship. The districts, the building principals have always been very approachable. They've been very helpful. They help us solve problems. I like to think we help them solve problems. And it's been a very, very good relationship from our standpoint, and we certainly thank you for that. So if there are any questions.
Thank you. Yes, I think, I know we have it down in discussion, but I would like to open up the table so that people would like to ask Jeff or Jen any questions. Please do.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Jeff, is the mask mandate on the bus from the SAU?
We follow, you know, Jen, can you answer that question? I honestly don't know the answer to that.
We've been following the federal mandate.
Yeah,
Because we fall under public transportation, and they specifically name school buses in that.
That's very true. We got a printout, and I could probably produce that if you would need a copy of that, that states that we are obligated to have students wear masks.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Not generally from the public, but thank you. Sorry. All right.
People could email additional questions to us, right?
Yes, but that's true. Please email, and I will get you an answer. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else from the board? Any questions?
Well, Jeff, when we met before, you had told us about, did you mention that none of the buses are older than 5 years?
No, we strive to have a 5-year average.
Okay,
Some of the buses
That's what
are
I wanted
older
to
than
clarify.
5 years. When we buy a bus, typically it's on the books for 11 years.
Oh, that's what.
10 years, it runs on a run. The 11th year is typically used as a spare. A lot of times we don't get to that age. We'll bring in newer fleet and replenish our various contracts with that newer fleet.
Thank you. I couldn't remember, and I didn't
Yeah.
find it in my notes. Thanks.
Anyone else? Any other questions about the contract, about funding?
So, one other question I had.
Yes, sir.
Remember a term that we were using when we were talking about using resources from other areas and other districts associated to drivers. Is that terms we use cross-rostering? Is that still a thing?
We don't call it cross-rostering because what we do as a company is we take all the drivers, and because in New Hampshire, I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been up here for about 4 years. And I'll tell you, New Hampshire is a lot tougher to get somebody hired than Pennsylvania was. And the reason why I say that, it's the same number of hours for training, but New Hampshire also has an additional rostering, if you will. So so you could come to me from another company, and I have to put you through a class, and you have to take a test, and you have to become rostered in that particular area for that particular company. What we do at the beginning of the year is we take all of our drivers, and we make sure that they are rostered. So if I need to borrow a driver from this terminal to go to that terminal, they're permitted to do so because they have all those credentials, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I have one other question.
Go ahead.
And I'm not sure whether or not this is tracked on your end or not. In terms of meeting those, all those additional things like sports, particularly in the middle school and high school, is data being tracked of like how many times so far this year, or in general, things do have to be canceled or postponed due to busing issues?
I would have to refer that to Jennifer.
Brian, who's been doing all the coordinating, doesn't he actually schedules everything around knowing, he knows how many buses he has, but, so technically, I'm not sure very much has been canceled. But there has been a lot of adjustments going on so that things happen after 4, so that we can send our own drivers there. And then I do know some of the smaller teams have been doing carpooling instead. But I think that happened in the past.
Oh, yeah.
too.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of them didn't
I was
want
just
to
wondering.
take a big bus, but no, there hasn't. This Saturday we have 6 buses going out. So we're keeping up. We usually do about 2 trips a day during the weekdays, and then whatever they have on the weekend. We've been keeping up with that.
Yeah, one thing I will mention too is a nice segue was today in our Hooksett, New Hampshire location, we had a trip going to Peterborough. And we are very short drivers in our Hooksett location. So what we did was we have a terminal in Peterborough. So the Peterborough driver came down, picked those students up, took them back to Peterborough. Then they go and do their run. And then we either sent a bus up from Hooksett to bring those students back, or that driver returned those students. So we have a little bit of flexibility, providing we're in the general areas of where the trip is going. So we try to do that because we try to accommodate as much as possible. We know that it's been tough. I know my home school district, I live in Massachusetts now, and every day we get on Twitter, and that's the only reason why I have Twitter, is what's going on in the district as far as activities and how the students are getting to where they're going. So we just need to keep up, and it's a way for me to keep up and just to see what's going on in the world of the district, especially the one I live in, because it's kind of funny. Your neighbors find out that you work for a school bus company, and there's a, can I ask you about this? So.
Thank you for that.
Tom?
I'm not sure whether this is best directed at you or in the district, but do we have any estimate of how our student load is on busing compared to what it would be without potential COVID restrictions and things like that? I mean, are we fortunate that we're fully staffed because we don't need as much as we would have normally predicted?
I can answer part of that question. When we got the contract originally, there were 21 bus routes. There were 19 routes that did a full route, meaning they did a co-op, and they either did a Hollis or a Brookline elementary. And then we had 2 additional elementary runs, one in Hollis and one in Brookline. Because of the bigger buses, the 77 passengers, we were able to take those students and disperse them amongst the other buses in the respective districts and reduce those and eliminate those 2 bus runs, which saved the district some money. So to answer your question, I don't know if COVID has played anything as far as how many students ride the bus or what your bus populations are. But I do know that we track the number of students that are on the bus because we have to, if we get pulled over, we have to provide a roster of who's on that bus and how many students are assigned to that bus and so on and so forth. Because if it's a 77 passenger and we've got 78 people on there, we're in violation. We're getting a ticket. And I can tell you to date, I'm the oldest employee in STA, been here for 25 years, and not once have we gotten a ticket for, at least in the areas of my responsibility, have we ever gotten a ticket for being overpopulated.
But has the student count total that you have to bus dropped significantly?
I would say no. I would say no. We provide a seat for every student, whether the student chooses to ride or not. I can't tell you why a student doesn't ride on any given day, but I would say the populations are pretty steady from pre-COVID till now.
So I'll just add that we have to have a seat for all of our students, regardless of if they bus or not. So I don't give STA the list of these families have opted for carpool and these have not. We need a spot for them.
Yeah.
So we can't, shrink them all down. So last year that we had a significant increase in carpool because of COVID. This year, we're seeing more ridership on the buses again, but then some are used to driving. So I think right now we have more carpoolers than we did 2 years ago, but definitely more shifting back to the buses for our daily trip to or from.
Tom,
So-
I'd like to,
No, I just wanted to just
on your topic.
summarize what I think I just heard. So the number of buses and the number of positions that we are providing is irrespective of the actual ridership that's eligible. So then the question becomes, are we seeing that there are more empty seats on the buses than would have been anticipated otherwise?
I would say the buses are not at maximum capacity, but I think that's based on people's comfort level of putting their child on the bus. And I think as we...
Oh, I understand the reason. I
Yeah.
just didn't know whether it's noticeable.
I'd say it's noticeable how many have returned to the bus from last year.
Yeah.
I think that's the
agree.
problem. There are some buses that are completely full with ridership, and then there are others that I'd say are probably 3/4 to 80% full because of carpool.
Thank you.
Part of that too has to do with the grade level of the student that you're transporting. You have a 77 passenger school bus, and what that means, the bus seat's 39 inches, and so you're talking about putting 3 students in a seat. That means each rear end is about 13 inches. And I can tell you, I'm this size, I actually just lost 80 pounds. I've been this size, this height, this wide for a long time, and I can tell you that 3 of me would not fit in the bus seat.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tom, and I apologize. What I wanted to add was that when Krista and Andy and I met with Jeff, he also explained, along with Andy and Gina, that that STA, when they took over the routes, did a massive rerouting that identified a lot of efficiencies in the routes and the number of kids per bus. It redistributed, and then the change in the sizes of the buses. This is, I'm not speaking on his behalf, but this is something that Jeff said to us. And I thought we could ask him if you could speak to that, or if Jen could speak something to that.
Yeah, every year when we get a roster of students, you purge the seniors that graduated, and you transport or move the students from this school to the next school, to the next school, to the next school. So you have to redistribute. So all the bus routes are going to change. We try to make every bus route that we do as optimal as we possibly can within a time frame. Could you fill them to 77 passengers all the time? Sure. But does that mean you're going to be in the same general neighborhood to be able to do that? So one bus, you might be able to do that in 30 minutes. The next bus you may take an hour to do. So we try to do it all within reason. So the bus ride isn't too long, but we reinvent the wheel basically every school season. Now, granted, the stops stay the same for the most part, but if we need to add a stop, we come to the district and we ask. If we don't have anybody at that stop, we may eliminate, not totally, we may eliminate it for this year because there's just nobody. Those students have moved on, whether they've moved out of the area or they've graduated.
But didn't you tell us, Jeff, that you have a software that you use that does the
We
kind of
do
optimizing?
have a software we use. It's called TransFinder. Jen is being new to us. She came from the driving ranks, So she's learning that as we go. She's in constant contact with those people when she runs into a problem. I know she and another young lady go in and they go over the routes. They're constantly going over the routes, just to try to make them run as smoothly as possible.
Ken?
Thanks. So I appreciate certainly everything you just talked about with logistics and retooling and the difference in transportation from last year to this year and everything like that. What is some of the feedback I've received in our district, what is the anticipated turnaround for not just pickup time in the morning, but drop off in the afternoon? We haven't seen a schedule yet for that. And I know some parents have struggled with that around knowing what times pickup times are going to be. So when do we typically plan to have those published?
I wish you'd stand at the microphone to speak. It's just because people need to hear you. Go.
What's the wire?
So we haven't published any drop-off times, especially in Brookline, because we were having issues getting timing on the buses, leaving the high school, leaving the middle school, leaving the high school, getting through Four Corners, getting to the elementary schools on time. When you publish the times, all of a sudden the parents start saying, oh, well, here's my time. I can be 10 minutes, you end up with parents not at stops. So we're trying to get to the point where, and it just has happened, we finally got we are working on updating them to get them to each school now, and then they'll be published. We just got them back from the drivers to try to get standardized times that seem to be working now. We're leaving the high school every day at 2:35 finally, and getting through to the schools at certain times. We all show up at the school now when we leave the CSDA or the upper elementary school at the same time. Generally, you can't, every day, it can't happen. But we didn't publish them yet because we say, we know when CSDA ends, so hopefully the parents are knowing they kind of have to be there until they can see us pretty regular time. But then if we put it out there too soon and we're wrong, we bring a lot of kids back to the schools, which causes problems because the parents aren't there at the times that they think, and then the buses, because of traffic and other things, will be off the schedule. So it's been really hard this year because of the carpool to figure out what that schedule is.
And I certainly appreciate that. I do. I think what the concern is, yesterday was an example. The bus came 15 minutes earlier than it's been all year, and all of our kids, we missed it because of that. So having a window, at least to know where the time period is, would really help, particularly for a lot of families that may have working and things like that too. So I very much appreciate that. I think it's happening both times, either way. Right. So having that kind of at least here's the time window and it's a plus or 5 minute delta or something would.
See, and there's our problem is that up until just probably within the past couple weeks, we haven't even been close to being within a plus or minus 5 minutes. It's just been crazy trying to get to that point where we know that time. And it's just all, everybody's getting used to the new schedules based on the fact that the buses are more loaded. Yep. There's still carpool and all that, but yes, we've been trying to figure this out and get it out to everybody, but we did just a week ago, I got all the routes back from the drivers. We're putting them in right now, and we're going to send them out to the schools. Hopefully we'll be done at the beginning of next week, because I know most of Hollis is done, and we've started on Brookline at this point.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful just to have an idea of, so I appreciate it.
Do you do real-time tracking, location tracking of the buses?
We don't.
You don't?
No, we don't have GPS. That's a GPS function, and we don't have GPS in the vehicles.
I just have one question getting back to the reconfiguration that you were talking about before. So has that resulted in our need for, on a daily basis, fewer drivers? Is that sort of what
No. One thing you'll never hear me say is that
right, and I don't mean to. We need drivers all the time. Right. I don't mean to say we need fewer, but right. I'm wondering if we have fewer buses out.
If you're asking, well, would it change the numbers? 19 vehicles. Would it change the number of 19 vehicles? Yeah. Right now, no.
Okay.
Anyone else? I really want to thank Jeff and Jen for meeting with us in August. You guys have been fantastic, providing us with all the information that we asked for. Being able to provide it to our districts has been so helpful. And then taking the time to meet with us in August and again come to our meeting here. We really genuinely appreciate all your time and effort. Thank you.
I also want to add, this is probably the first year in a long time that I have heard the superintendent regularly come to meetings with positive feedback on his experiences regarding transportation. And I'm not saying that as a joke. Instead of it being a constant agenda item of how we're going to fix it, it's frequently an update of his pleasure. And even if some of the parents are not at the same level of satisfaction, the fact that our CEO is pleased has a big impact on all of us.
Well, we certainly thank you for that. It's nice to hear when you're doing something good, because in our world, a lot of times, and I'm sure Andy can attest to, every time the phone rings, it's not always a nice little compliment. So, but, you know, in closing, if there are no more questions, I too would like to say that, again, we've been here, this is the start of our third year. And, you know, when you go into it, it's kind of like a first date. You don't know how it's going to go. Well, I can tell you that it's gone very well. We are so pleased to be here. And I can tell you that in a lot of districts and back in Pennsylvania, we weren't a partner. We weren't part of the district. And I will tell you that in Hollis, Brookline, we certainly feel that way. We feel that we're part of the community. We're a partner in what goes on here. Just the simple fact that you included us when you were giving the vaccines and everything, that was a big deal to us, because we didn't know how we were going to get our people vaccinated. And for you to invite us to do that means that, you know, we are part of the community and we're being accepted. And that goes a long way, not only with a company, but it goes a long way with the drivers and with the workforce. They really appreciate it. They love being here. I think that has a lot to do with why our attendance is so high and why I'm paying attendance bonuses the way I am, is because they come to work because they genuinely like what they do and who they do it for. So for all of you and to all your community members, thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you guys are free to go. I think all the questions have been answered. So thank you so very much.
Indeed. And anytime you need anything else, please reach out.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Gina is queuing up about a 7 to 8 minute video presentation. As you know, every year we have an administrative retreat, and we utilize the strategic plan to come up with our goals and objectives building from year to year. One of the pieces that we didn't want to do was bring everybody together. You know, from an administrative standpoint, we don't want to have all our administrators here. So we looked at a way, and they came together and put together this video to kind of give the SAU board kind of an understanding of our K-12 vision. And then when this ends, I'll talk for a couple minutes on a couple other things and then take any questions on that. So I'd like to thank Gina, the administrative team, all the building level administrators for their efforts to put this together and kind of give everybody in our community an idea where we're heading this year.
Welcome to SAU41 school community. On behalf of our building principals, we would like you to sit back and relax while we present to you our 2021-2022 school year district goals. Our goals will cover the bucket areas of infrastructure, future ready, essential standards, and habits of learning to address the whole child.
The infrastructure goal for Hollis is to develop a plan to address improving playground structures, outdoor classrooms, and surface issues to meet the SAU41 safety standards and criteria. We plan to review playground insurance audits conducted in June of 2021. We want to develop a 3-year action plan to address the playground concerns, outdoor classroom needs, and areas in need of enhancement. We'd like to develop a timeline of implementation for improvements and associated costs, and then we plan to revise and revisit this plan yearly.
In Brookline, we will review our physical assets against the maintenance requirements, building and safety codes, and projected enrollment of our school community in order to ensure a safe and optimal learning environment. Our action steps will be for the Facility Committee to research energy systems and recommend floor plans, monitor Nasdaq numbers and current enrollment figures, review CSDA's playground insurance audit conducted in June of 2021 to research and recommend upgrades to the playground structures to meet SAU41 safety standards and criteria, and develop an action plan timeline of implementation and associated costs.
The infrastructure goals for the co-op are to continue to improve upon the safety and effectiveness of building infrastructure and practices. The action steps for the middle school are to continue to train students, school staff, and administration on all safety procedures and drills, identify areas of the building in need of improved safety preparedness, and to continue to refine, train, and rehearse emergency operation plans through our safety committee.
At Hollis Brookline High School, we will manage and keep in good repair its physical assets in order to keep students and staff safe and optimize student learning. This will include action steps such as improving building and grounds access, the completion of the turf field, reviewing our 5-year tech plan, renovating the front office to allow for better control of main entry to the building, and implementation of ongoing roof repair phases.
The goal for Future Ready in the elementary schools in both Hollis and Brookline is to explore best practices for students to become innovators through inquiry. We will collaborate with each other to form a joint committee to research programs with a focus on school-wide participation. This committee will make recommendations to administration, and next steps will follow in accordance.
The goal for the middle school is to conduct periodic review of individual student academic achievement and implement processes to meet individual student learning needs. Our action steps are to review and refine the procedures of our multi-tiered system of supports team in alignment with the recommendations from the SAU41 MTSS committee. Number 2 is to review and refine structure, procedures, and objectives for our common planning time to improve student performance and more effectively meet student needs. And lastly, implement and expand programming opportunities for students to include a 7 through 12 vision.
Action steps at Hollis Brookline High School include reviewing and refining procedures for Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention systems within MTSS, utilizing our adaptive scheduler for CAV block, to continue to expand and enhance our choices programming and opportunities, including exploring alternative pathways and programming for our extended learning opportunities, and use of online learning tools to meet individual student needs.
The Essential Standards goal for the elementary schools is to revise and implement grade-level supports to reduce learning gaps. Our action steps are to review data collected from previous teachers, identify learning gaps in individual student needs, flexibly group students for implementation of supports, and to continue cycle through teams and PLC meetings.
The goal for the middle school is to ensure that all students are provided with continued growth opportunities within the general education curriculum. Our action steps are to integrate a career fair and the use of Naviance, research student portfolios for incoming and outgoing students, and develop and integrate cross-curricular projects and activities.
At Hollis Brookline High School, we will work to ensure that curriculum, instruction, assessment, and learning opportunities are designed and delivered to enable and empower learners in order to create a more personalized learning community. Our Instructional Practices Committee will advise and make recommendations for school procedures, specifically with respect to grading and assessment practices.
The Habits of Learning goal for the elementary schools is to implement a multi-tiered system of support school-wide to address the whole child, social, emotional, and intellectual. Our action steps are to build common understanding of MTSS within our buildings through professional learning, site visits, and discussions. To continue to design, supplement, and promote social, emotional learning. To review and refine our data tools to identify learning gaps and interventions. And finally, monitor data to inform interventions.
The goal for the middle school is to continue to develop and integrate a systematic approach that is research-based to ensure the social and emotional well-being of all students. Our action steps are to update our ROC programming to meet current student needs and that align with nationally recognized social and emotional learning standards, to seek input from staff and students on interests that help drive ROC programming, and to continue to train students and staff in mental health first aid.
At Hollis Brookline High School, we will continue to implement MTSS to meet the needs of all learners in the areas addressed in the Portrait of a Cavalier. In order to accomplish this, we will work to provide professional development opportunities for staff to re-engage, reintegrate students into an in-person school community, as well as support grade 9 student transition into the high school with programmed school counselor involvement in the classroom.
Thank you for viewing our district goals presentation. Our district will continue to strive to support our teachers, the whole child, and continue our work as HB1 community.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank the administrators for their efforts during the retreat this year and all their leadership that they've shown in the first 6 weeks of school. From an SAU board point of view, I want you to think of just really one word. That's really kind of my focus for the year, and it's really capacity. The first way that capacity we're looking at is staffing. We have to be aware that we have concerns around staffing. What used to result in an opening in Hollis Brookline would probably generate 30 to 60 resumes based on the area. This year, for the first time since I've been here, we opened the school year with positions unfilled. The applicant pool is shrinking drastically, and that's going to become very difficult as we go through a traditional school year, which will involve, unfortunate situations regarding FMLA leaves, which will also be celebrations around people expanding their families. All those different aspects are going to make staffing very difficult at times. And we have to look at how are we going to attract staff today, tomorrow, and 5 years down the road. And the same can be said for our administrative team. We're very fortunate. We have a young, excellent administrative team, but how do we cultivate them? How do we keep growing? How do we keep them moving forward? The second thing is bandwidth. Pretty much all the individuals that were in that video, along with your SAU office, is pretty much at capacity. There's not a little extra wiggle room here and there, because everything that went on in a traditional school year is still continuing. And then on top of that, you put the protocols around COVID. And that just adds another layer that, yes, we are taking care of, but we have to continually rebalance almost daily on what the priority is. So it's almost like the emergency room, where you walk in and the worst situation gets treated first. And it's not like the deli where you get a number and now it's my turn. All right? That can't happen because, again, we're children first. And there are many days where Gina and I walk in and we have a wonderful schedule of what we hope to do. And then I get a call and somebody's made an unfortunate decision before 7:30 in the morning that we're dealing with. And then we find out that Gina's over covering a classroom at the middle school because we can't find the appropriate number of subs. So in the third piece around capacity is the leadership capacity. We were able to hire some new members to our staff in Hollis and the co-op, and they are doing wonderful. But these are people new to the leadership profession, and we need to make sure through Gina and my efforts that we cultivate them and we keep them growing so that we will always have the ability to backfill. And I'll give you an example. We had a retirement from Mr. Ouellette at the high school, and we're going to lose 25 plus years of experience. That loss is tremendous because you lose all the historical pieces. And right now there are times when Bob is calling the parents that he used to have in school. So it's an easier conversation. But we're growing that next group of administrators, and I think we had an excellent hiring season, and everything I've seen to date tells me that we're on the right track. We just need to mold and meld them into HB. From a capacity issue, we also have it around curriculum. As you heard throughout the video, we're moving from what was RTI, response to intervention, to MTSS, multi-tiered support system. And for those people at the co-op, that started top down. From the high school guidance, when Lauren was over at the high school, we started introducing that, and we're seeing that paying benefits, because it's not always that a child is struggling academically. Sometimes it's a child is struggling with things that are going on in their life, so they can't even get to the academics. So MTSS allows us to start looking at this more from the whole child approach. We're not trying to parent. We're just trying to take the child that arrives to us and assist them in all the different phases. And it is a partnership. We don't do MTSS or counseling service or anything like that without parents being aware of it. You know, if your child's going to guidance, they know there's guidance appointments. There's career counseling. There's all of those pieces. We also need, and a bunch of us at the SAU, along with some board members, are looking at career technical education. We sit in the midst of 4 centers. We have Nashua, we have Alvin, we have Milford, and we have Messinic. And they have a wealth of opportunities for our students, and we're trying as a state to make these become more uniform so that children have more access. Tom has been a longtime member of the Milford board. He'll be participating later this month with some other board members and some SAU staff on how do we look at things. One thing that we've always done in our region is keep our school calendars the same. So from that standpoint, we do very well. But it's the balancing act between our schedules don't align perfectly with start and stop times. So how do we get a child the English or the math when they want to be over there for the automotive and all of that? So those are the discussions we're looking at with regard to that. In terms of our regular education, you know, middle of the road, Andy Corey, right down the center, how do we support them more? And you heard Tim mention it in terms of the cab block scheduler. It used to be cab block was I would go someplace when I needed assistance. Well, I would probably not go because I never needed assistance. The difference now is with the cab block scheduler is the teacher can say, no, Andy needs to come to math, or Andy needs to come to English during cab block. And as much as that started out being difficult for some of our students, they're now starting to see the long-term benefits for them because their grades are improving, they have a better balance, they don't feel overwhelmed because they want to do a part-time job in school or athletics in school. So it's really helping them schedule that. And we want to also at the same time look at our honors and advanced placement. How do we keep those current? How do we move those forward? And if staffing becomes an issue, how do we start to work with other districts? Some of you may know that presently we have some self-contained programming for some of our students who have individual education plans and that. In some of our districts, we are now able to take advantage of that, and we have students coming to us from other districts. That first gives us some tuition dollars, but at the same time makes for a very robust program and everybody gains. We need to start looking at that same model from the lens of AP and those things. We now know that Zoom can be an effective method of learning. Virtual learning can be a component to all of a sudden offer a class that we can't offer, but maybe our neighbors right over in Amherst or Milford have that teacher. And maybe they're struggling to keep their enrollment up. So as superintendents, we're starting to talk about how do we maximize human resources to provide the coursework for our children. Part of this is we learned a lot during COVID. Many of our students found online learning to be their niche. Some of our students found it to be very difficult. How do we start to take those positive pieces and start to look at time differently? You know, we have to start looking at time differently. We know some students don't learn well in the morning. We know some students always want to be done early because they have athletics or a part-time job. How do we start looking at flexible scheduling, working with our teaching staff, changing our collective bargaining agreements so we take the element of time out of it? You know, if you go back to when I was in college, you were either a day student or a night student. And you couldn't commingle. It wasn't allowed. And then I think somebody said, why? And now, basically, you have your college schedule that's open the whole day. And you might have a college course at 6 o'clock at night because it works for your schedule. And I think ultimately, we have to start to be more flexible around that element of time. We're also, and I'm reviewing them, so they'll probably come out early next week, just received our enrollment projections from Nasdaq. And they are projecting for us to grow. New Hampshire as a whole went down by 6.9%, the student population. We stayed current or grew. And just like the woman talked about, New Hampshire is becoming a destination, and within that state, we are becoming a destination district. So we need to look at enrollments and start to look at what services do we need to provide. We do hear a lot about our budget. I think sometimes people forget that a student could walk in tomorrow and have significant needs, and we're required by law to meet those needs. If that child required an out-of-district placement, that would be somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 that we don't have in the budget because we're doing it 18 months in advance. If that student is able to come into one of our self-contained programs, that still has the cost of OT, PT, all of those therapies. And the more we can build those structures, first of all, the better service we give the student, and second, we avoid costs. In our elementary schools, we now have students who come to Hollis on a tuition basis because that commute is better than going to Lexington, Mass, or some other out-of-district. So we need to look at building programs where Hollis and Brookline in some ways become, the lines are a little blurred. Because 6 or 8 students with significant difficulties together are going to make huge progress. And this isn't me reading about this. This is me standing at the soccer field with a parent of one of our children who's 3 years old and cannot believe the progress because just like all of us, they want to fit in. And the minute they get to school and see behaviors, because you have the handicapped children and their non-handicapped peers, and they're going to fit in. And once we make that hurdle, now education follows. Because there's connections, there's relationships, and now reading, writing, numbers, all of those things become easier. In terms of the SAU, we had the Lease Committee that we're going to talk a little bit later on. But our facility is bursting. We basically don't have room for a communication specialist, but at the same time, I believe it's an essential element that the district needs to have. And just so people know, this was talked about probably 6, 7 years ago. Michelle St. John was on our school board at that point and advocated for it on a regular basis. But we had other priorities. And then COVID struck, and now we see an increased value because that bandwidth piece, we simply can't attend to everything that's expected. And there are presently 200 education bills at the state. Those 200 bills, a percentage of them are going to pass and become law. And I guarantee they're going to have some effect on manpower at the SAU or building level. In terms of our buildings, we just finished our second project in Hollis and took 2 older buildings and added decades of use. Hollis Primary, it's probably a 60-year-old building, has its first fire sprinkler system ever. We have technology in those buildings. We have changed windows, we have changed doors. We have now moved over and are completing the STEAM study in Brookline. Brookline's a little different because they have two things going on at the same time. They have growing enrollment and buildings that need upgrades. So as you saw highlighted, there have been discussions going on about 7 or 8 months now. How do we start to look at this? And it's a big number. You know, we were told everything that we looked at was between 11 and 16 million. That's a big number, and I get that. But our neighbors in Amherst are building a new school. 500 students, elementary, that number's 55 million. So for one pool of money, we add decades, literally decades. And our custodians, our teachers, and our students do a great job of maintaining our facilities. So I know that if we put this resource into it, we're going to get many, many years. The co-op is already, we're doing discussions around what does capacity look like here. Because those Brookline students are coming in a few years. Sounds like it's a long way off, but it'll be really quick, you know? And how do we address, you know, a middle school that doesn't have much property left? Class sizes, which are important to all of us. All of those things, and while at the same time maintaining the budget. And when I look at the presentation by the administration and my talk to you tonight, it's not about, and never has been about, me or this administration. It's about the systems, the policies, and the procedures that set the district up for long-term success. We're cultivating administrators so that you have a pipeline to choose from as things move forward. I mean, I can't imagine something going better than our transfer of Tim Garzone to our high school. He hit the ground running. He's doing a fantastic job, and that's because he's been prepared for that. And we need to continue to cultivate him, so eventually, if he chooses, he can come over and sit in an SAU building. Patrick, who backfilled, came from Hillsborough Deering. That's also great because now we bring fresh ideas and new ways of doing things into our system. And we have those regular leadership discussions. Every 2 weeks, the principals in Hollis meet with Gina and I on Tuesday. On Wednesday, it's the co-op. And on Thursday, it's Hollis. So Brookline, co-op, and Hollis. We are constantly looking at who's sitting in classrooms that should be encouraged to get their masters. Who's the next person to lead the curriculum? We had just a wonderful find, and Abby Diaz came to us. Dr. Diaz is at the Hollis district, and she's in charge of curriculum. And in her short time, she's getting to know kids, and she's giving us new ideas, critiquing what we do, but learning from us. And in Brookline, one of the things we're looking at is as we continue to grow, our two principals can't continue to manage all the evaluations that we're required to do. And I will give kudos to all our administrators, because all our teachers got evaluated last year. You know, other districts just didn't do evaluations. They either got a Zoom or an in-person evaluation for all our staff. And depending on how long you were here, dictated how often you were observed. But we need to look at that bandwidth issue because they need to have time where they're thinking, cultivating, creating the next thing. And that's very important. With regard to the strategic plan, as Tim alluded to, we have finished the portrait of a Cavalier. The person we were working with was able to secure a different job. So now by December, I should be able to start to give you a framework, kind of more of the strategic plan. But that plan is critical because, again, that's the foundation for the long-term vision. Where are we going with the positives from remote learning? You know, we also know, and we're discussing the best way to integrate it into the district. I believe over the next few years, we need to do more with supports for students. Whether that's a social worker, a guidance counselor, what that is, we need to do that. And why do I say that? Because in my observations in classrooms and on the playground, our children have taken a step back on how to interact with each other. So it's a fact that this has impacted kids. You know, you may have seen stories, I've read them in the paper, of fights at high school levels and just things that like weren't going on, but it's this big adjustment. Now, we're very fortunate, and I've always said this, we start with a great product. People choose to come here, they choose to pay large taxes because they want the school system. Funny aside, we were doing the research around the Brookline schools, and part of that, we did an exercise of what would our schools look like if we went to the state maximums. 30 in the upper grades and 25 in the lower grades. No intent of ever going there. But boy, did my inbox and Ken's inbox and the board's inbox fill up immediately. Now, that's not why we moved here. And those small class sizes are what's helping us around this social emotional relationship reconnections. Because when there's 17 kids in your classroom, you probably get to everybody multiple times per day. When there's 25 to 30 kids, if they were like me, you could hide every day, you know? And I say that because it's no secret, I struggled as a reader. But I could hide, so I didn't have to do the read aloud. So it took years for them to discover that I couldn't read. So it's very important that we maintain our small class sizes because that's how we locate the issues. And then the issues go to MTSS, and we come together as a team. And it's built into our schedules. And we discuss the whole child, what's going on. And the nice part of the team is, now all of a sudden I realize it's not just happening in homeroom, it's happening in special, it's happening in math. So now we're able to have a discussion with families about how do we take the next step. So from our administrative team, you know, we are moving forward. We're not sitting here. We are going to talk later tonight. We're going to request a couple days for early release because we know that we can utilize that data and accelerate closing those learning gaps. And I will tell you that from my visits to classrooms, the learning gaps are subtle. They're not a glaring weakness. It's not like the whole fourth grade saying, we don't know X. But it's those subtle differences of student to student, and how do we get back everybody to a level playing field. In the coming board meetings, you're going to get our first round of Ames Web, PSAT testing, those type of data points. And you'll be able to see this from a data standpoint. And what does that data mean in terms of MTSS, the building, our programming? And I think part of this is we need to run, as I always say, separate trains. One train is to get to where we want to be. But we've got to make sure we're running a vision train. Because just like we could never imagine some of the things that we're doing in education from 1999 that I read from Rich Raymond to now. It's not that long ago when you think about it. But it's a monumental growth. It is going to be monumental growth again. And if we don't stay up with the vision train and those cultivating those ideas, all of a sudden we're going to look up and we're going to be behind or not where we want to be. So in terms of the strategic goals, there's more to come. There's more into tonight's discussion, but I just really wanted you to focus on that capacity issue, because that's the big word for us. Whether it's curriculum, staffing, leadership, bandwidth, you name it, it's about our capacity and what we can do. And how do we balance those needs with the needs of paying for those programs? Because there's got to be a balance. We won't, just like 8 years ago, many of the things we have, we weren't sure we were going to have. But it's taken 6 years to get or propose a curriculum, communications position. So it's about that vision, but the vision has to align with everything else that's going on. And we have to watch the economy. And I'm going to jump ahead for a second, but I think it's a good time. With regards to the economy, I wanted to share with the SAU board what we're returning to taxpayers. Okay? In the Hollis School District, closed the FY21 budget and returned $875,928 and allocated money to do an air handler on the roof. Yeah. In Brookline, they closed and are going to return $517,582. And we did everything the children needed in both those districts. In the co-op, we're returning $1,909,879. So across the SAU, we will return $3,304,389. The brunt of those savings are transportation, our special ed, our staffing, our services. Our special ed staff did beyond yeoman's work during the pandemic, yet we still saw significant savings because parents could not take their child to that out-of-district placement. But we made it work. We made it work, and that's a credit to Bob, who's moved on, Amy, and Lauren. So in terms of this year, how things change, we're about to freeze both the Brookline and Hollis budgets because of concerns, because enrollment went up kind of unexpectedly, but unexpectedly, and then wonderful families moved in, and we are working with wonderful children, but sometimes those children have costs, and they're worth every single penny of it. But again, we're talking about budgets tonight for people who haven't even thought of buying in Hollis or Brookline and what they bring. So I really want to thank the administration for the video. And my plan is to start talking about this strategic planning more at the individual boards in the coming months, and kind of really get us moving forward. And a lot of that will also tie back into the budget. Questions on the presentation or anything for me?
Tom?
Well, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Gina. We've got a lot of information. To what degree, if at all, has staff input been brought into this plan, and how is that accomplished if it isn't included?
In terms of the pieces I outlined, are kind of, I'll say in some ways, non-staff related. Now, some elements are collective bargaining because, if you build the right contracts, you will have the staffing. In terms of the process around things like MTSS, MTSS is a faculty-involved procedure. It's a group of grade level people that come together and they talk about the needs and things of that. So that's why it kind of works its way up the chain. So very little of this is downward. More of it is upward, with the brunt of it coming through the building principals.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just a quick question. So the staffing piece stuck out to me a little bit. I'm curious, I'm certainly well aware with transportation we talked about with bus driver shortage. I know the overall economy, it's hard to find workers. How do we compare relative to other districts? When you talk to other superintendents, are we seeing that they are also seeing staffing shortages where they're not filling all of their open positions and it's all relative, or are we behind or ahead? I'm just curious on that.
I'll start and then you can finish. I think we're in good shape. We're still considered a destination district.
Okay.
Part of that is teachers love our class sizes. Teachers love that, for the most part, staying in with the curriculum guidelines. They have flexibility of how they teach. We're not, I'll say, program intensive. And what I mean by that is we don't have a reading program and here's your script. You know, we teach reading by finding out what level a child is on, and they read those books. The big struggles right now for us are more our hourly wage people.
Okay.
Our custodians, our paraprofessionals. Right now, we are in good shape compared to other districts. But at the same time, we're starting to see people walk in and resign because they can get a retail job for $4 or $5 more, and it's a lot less responsibility, you know? So that's part of it. And then I think, and this is in a district, you know, I just saw a district talking last week to somebody who had 4 teachers leave after the first month because the whole environment around the profession is difficult. And when you're talking people who have math and science degrees, they can go anywhere. You know, there's plenty of places for a math teacher to work in private industry, or a chemist. There are plenty of jobs. So I think part of this is cultivating that next generation of people. And we see this career-wise across the board. There was one point where we thought we had too many lawyers in our society because everybody became a lawyer, you know, for a period of time. And then everybody became an engineer. And it goes back and forth. And it kind of is, you know, we're seeing some struggles. And we're also seeing a workforce because there were a number of years in the last 10 years, as a young teacher, there weren't openings. And when we changed the retirement in New Hampshire to basically 65, that meant we had 5 more years of top-heavy salaries and people staying on longer than they did. So there wasn't that natural flow and turnover. So a lot of young teachers couldn't find jobs, so they left the profession. And they're not going to come back because in some ways they can't afford to take a pay cut. Gina, your thoughts? I know you've talked to a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, we do have openings in, I believe, every single one of our buildings in some capacity or what have you, but, you know, Andy and I each go to our regional meetings of superintendents and assistant superintendents and, you know, feel lucky that we are where we are. You know, if we're looking at 4 openings, they might be looking at 27 openings. And, you know, one district just had to remove the entire language program from their middle school and move the teacher to the high school. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to offer language in the high school. So we are fortunate in that respect, but it's definitely, I mean, it's a struggle.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Tom?
Do we offer any referral bonuses to our staff?
We don't have that in our agreements, but I will tell you that's how a lot of our staff arrive. You know, like they'll talk to their colleagues in other districts and they'll just talk about who we are and what we do, and that's where a number of our candidates come from.
Are we prohibited because of our agreements?
I would say we would need to do a sidebar if we wanted to look at something like that.
Even if it's not professional staff exclusive?
Again, since pretty much every person that works for us is unionized, I think it would be safer to have that discussion. I'm not saying they'd be opposed, but I think, you know, that would be something the individual board should discuss and see if they would like to put out there.
I'd say first, we want to hear it from you that you would like us to consider it if you think, and perhaps if you are aware of any such programs that are having good results, let us know.
Well, I think the biggest thing you're seeing in the industry is companies are moving to assisting students with their student loans. Now, we don't have that in education yet, but if you're going to compete for graduates, you're going to have to start looking at all potential alternatives. And again, we have more young teachers come to us with their masters. The big thing used to be you paid for somebody's masters. If you go to UNH and were an education major, you were graduating with your masters, but you were also getting a 5th year of debt. So we may just need to look within our own resources that we're already allocating, and just look at how we reallocate those resources.
I think that's really interesting, and then I'm curious too. I know there are rural. We classify as rural, correct?
Brookline does, Hollis does not.
Okay, so all right, that's a little bit of a hitch, but I know that on like some medical things, there's loan forgiveness in rural areas. If you work with I don't know if that's at all an option, but just jumping on that, it's an interesting thought. I think it's certainly what you just said is very interesting.
Yeah, there are some forgiveness programs like out there that we encourage all teachers to look at, because again, it may be because you're a special ed teacher and who you're working with in that. But again, I think that's what we're seeing kind of as the workforce becomes more competitive.
Yeah. And I just wonder if we piggyback.
We need to be sort of a state level program. That's actually how I got half my tuition paid. The state of New Jersey did
Oh, really?
It did a scholarship program, and if you taught, you got your tuition paid. So, but it was a state level program. That's kind of, individual districts can't necessarily afford to do that.
Correct. Yeah.
But,
Anyone else? Well, I really want to thank you for that presentation. It's so helpful for me to see all 3 districts and what we're all doing, because we do get caught up in our individual districts, and it is so helpful to see what's happening with all of us. And I know that's a really helpful presentation, and to see and to look at it through K through 12. That's very helpful, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Both of you, and to all the administrators. Thank you.
I will pass that along.
All right, presentation of the 2023 SAU draft budget.
Yes. Just so you know, Linda is actually on vacation, so that is why she is not here. Kelly was going to come, and I told her not to because she was kind enough to cover the Hollis BudCom meeting this week. So we're just trying to balance the bandwidth piece with all of us as well. In your packet, we provided you with the SAU Budget Subcommittee. From the SAU, it's myself, Gina, Kelly, and Linda. Karen Jew and Brian Rader represent the Brookline School Board and the Brookline Finance Committee. Hollis has Carol Roy and Michael Harris from the Budget Committee. And the co-op, Krista Whalen and Darlene Mann from the Budget Committee. The Budget Subcommittee supports the budget that we're going to be talking about tonight. And the pieces that we're looking at. The first piece we provided in your packet was the SAU41 proposed communication specialist. We provided you with a kind of a task list. And what continues to happen is there are more responsibilities, legal responsibilities assigned to the SAU that require the manpower to respond. And what gets kind of put on the back burner are some of our communications out to families. Last week, as many of you know, I finished my tenure as president of the New England Association of School Superintendents. And we were there. We had a gentleman come in from Wisconsin who did a presentation on communication, social media, and all of that. And what really hit me was how much of the good news they get out. You know, all the things that are happening with kids that get scholarships or recognized for this, that, or something else. And we don't have that ability because we're reacting in a lot of cases and our bandwidth is limited. That also creates problems for our website. You know, you try to keep your website current, but when it's a bunch of people doing that, like Kelly has responsible for a piece of the website, Carol Tyler has a piece, Gina does a piece. But when we get into budget season, all of a sudden, Kelly has no time to do that. And Carol Tyler does computers, but she also does our I4C data, which is how we get reimbursed. And it's a very complex system, and it's due October 1st. And basically, we go through a series of approvals between October 1st to the 15th. So all of a sudden, her bandwidth shrinks. So we're looking at somebody that could have helped like through this crisis, you know, with communications, in terms of the hours that we're putting in. When you look at the top 5 people, Gina, myself, Kelly, Amy, and Lauren, I'd say on any given week, the low hours are 50 to probably a maximum around 70. You know, I think that's what we're hitting. And to make it all happen, it's that sacrifice of, you know, the weekend time and different things like that. And during COVID, you know, it's been 24/7, 7 days a week, you know, especially last year when the notifications and all that were different. It's a little different this year. In some ways, it's a little easier. In some ways, it's a little more complex. So we're really looking at this communication specialist and hoping that we could get community support for that. The total all-in for that position is about $70-something thousand. In terms of walking you through the budget, in your packet, I'm going to go back to basically the kind of the last page. Right? And on the last page, we're proposing a budget of $2,107,176. That's all in for everything. But let me just start with just the bare bones budget, which would be no new position, just basically the adjusted budget that is the numbers that the voters get to consider. That number would be $2,014,538,000. That's a 2.9% increase. If the voters were to support, and the board supports the communication specialist, we would add in $76,638 for that position. That's salary and benefits, New Hampshire retirement, the whole ball of wax, which takes us to $2,091,176, which takes the budget all of a sudden to a 6.8% increase for just adding that position in. And then we had put in last year, we did end up utilizing it, but weren't able to complete the compensation comparisons because of COVID. So we had put in $16,000 to allow the board the flexibility to make adjustments. If we were to leave that $16,000 in the budget, that's where we come to our $2,107,176 for the 7.6% increase. The percentage sounds very large, but in terms of dollars, it's $149,579. In terms of the adjusted budget, all right, if you leave the position in, the difference between the adjusted budget, which is the number that we get in default if the voters vote down the budget, the difference is $88,966. So really, the brunt of this increase is that one position. And again, from a systems point of view, I think this is a position that's going to pay dividends down the road for our students, for how we communicate, for how we get information out. And that's a struggle now. We have no newspaper. You know, the Rotary is trying to do their best. But we have nothing except our websites and our email distribution to get the news out. And we have to figure out another way of involving the citizens that don't have students in the school system. You know, many of them, their children have simply graduated. And they were very much supporters and still are supporters. But they don't know necessarily what's going on with our budgets and that. So there's no real significant adjustments. Actually, our proposed budget, if you just take it with, and compare it to the adjusted budget, we're proposing without the position or the 16,000 for salaries, 2,014,538. The adjusted is 2,018,210. So we're actually below the adjusted budget until we get to the position, the communication specialist, and the approved salaries. The reason I'm looking at putting in money in for the approved salaries is because the board has and continues to be supportive and generous with the administration. At the same time, the board in this instance has a very finite budget. And we're always trying to balance going to the reserve fund balance or funding it. So you would have the option of deciding not to put $16,000 into the budget, knowing that in May, when we sit down to do raises and that, you may have to approve funds from the unreserved fund balance. And you'll see that to come into play when we look at the final numbers for FY21 at the SAU. Again, like I said, there were concerns expressed by some members of the subcommittee, not about the position, not about the rationale, but just about the growth of the SAU. But at the same time, the growth is a result of the expectations. And I don't just mean the expectations from a curriculum instruction point of view, I mean the legal obligations and expectations. To give you an example today, a special ed director spends over half the day at a state mediation session. Those happen regularly. That's standard business. There are many days where, again, Gina and I will come in thinking we're going to do one thing, and it has to be shelved to address something else. I think when I looked at SAUs in comparison last year, I think we're very competitive. I think we're very, very competitive, and I think we're doing, in my humble opinion, a very good job with a very lean staffing level. And I'd be happy to take any questions about the budget. For those of you, just so you know the process, we would bring the budget back in December for a public hearing. After the public hearing and input, we would have another round of discussions, and we would then vote to move this forward to a warrant article on the 3 district budgets. Once this has gone through this tonight, Kelly schedules another meeting with the subcommittee so they can weigh in and make any final adjustments that they see fit. So I'll gladly try to answer any questions around the SAU budget.
Tom?
Specifically, I have questions about the communication specialist position, and I'll lay them out before asking you to answer them. First question is, do you actually have a formal job description that you would propose for this position? Second question is, can you articulate, and not necessarily tonight, but I think this is important, articulate what impact this has on students? Mm-hmm. And the third is, looking at the intended responsibilities, it's not clear to me that the individual would have the expertise to formulate the communications themselves. So it sounds more like what I would call a publicist type position, which may have value, but it's not clear to me that it would remove workload from the individuals who need to generate the content.
Mm-hmm. The specialist responsibilities that were outlined would be fine-tuned between now and probably December to kind of come up with that job description. In terms of the comparison to a publicist, I think that may be accurate when we start the position, that there'll still be time consumed from the administration, but I expect it to be able to grow into the position. because again, I don't know what industry or background they'll come from, but schools are very different. And I think anybody coming into a new entity the first time taking a position is going to require support and input, but at the same time, it will take away some of what I'll call the basic tasks of uploading the document, actually setting the emails to go out, things that are presently on senior management schedules.
And the impact on students?
Well, I think to me, the impact on students is when we communicate better with our citizens, all right, they'll have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And then as we create this vision, it will be easier for us to sell that vision and acquire the resources and things needed that will allow our students to advance. That's more the global picture from a student who maybe we had 3 National Merit finalists. Okay, they'll be in Tim's board report next week. So we had 3 National Merit finalists and 2 commended students. That needs to be, I'm going to use the word sold, more than we sell it. It'll be in Tim's board report, and that'll be the end of it. You know, other than maybe it picks up by a paper or something. But I don't know how many people realize that probably now, we're probably, in my 8 years, approaching probably somewhere to be between 50 and 60 National Merit finalists. You know, so if you think about that, that's 8 years, that's probably an average of, 7. You know, that means, we had 3 kids in the top 16,000 in the country. That's pretty impressive. But we don't have the time or the manpower. We had a young man who is now doing his senior project with a research professional at a university because they connected through a program over the summer. Now, I have that information and have not been able to get it out. But those are the things that we need to do, because the other piece it's going to do is it's going to also enhance, again, the favorable views of our schools by people looking to move here. So it kind of perpetuates the next generation of success.
May I speak to that, Andy? If you don't mind, please, just because, oh, I'm sorry. Holly, I apologize. I just want to give an example, a live example of what I experienced when we were doing our project for energy. One of our board members happens to be a communications professional at the time. She's no longer on the board. And so she, pro bono, did all the communications work to mail out to every citizen of Hollis. And it wasn't just, it wasn't spin or anything. It was beautiful graphics to give dates, times, public forum dates, board meeting dates, et cetera. So it was informational, but it was extremely attractive because of her skill. And she could do it lickety-split. I mean, she put together large postcards, 2-sided, 4-color, print, done in 2 days. I mean, it was valuable because it allowed our residents across Hollis to know what we were doing, who, what, where, when, why, where are the links to click for information, further information, how do you get on the live stream, et cetera, and a very attractive, simple postcard because that was her profession, and it wasn't spin at all.
Hollis?
To me, the greatest impact on students will be that the people who've been hired to do the jobs like assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum and instruction will be able to do the job in charge about curriculum and instruction, or a superintendent, so that there won't be as much time being spent. This piece has to be done, and so then it falls on the laps of the people who really want to make our students' lives better. So I feel like that's one of the most important things that this would do. And then just piggybacking on what Tammy said, when a taxpayer pays their tax bill, the largest percentage of their bill is going to their schools. That is what they're investing in. They're investing in our schools. We don't get water service or trash service or really much in the way of road service, to be honest. So we pay for our schools. That's what we invest in as taxpayers. And we need to know what is our investment doing? Like, what's going on? And the more information that we have as taxpayers, the more willing we are to invest and the more willing that, so I see this as a positive. I do see why people might complain about it, but I think it's necessary, and I think we live in a world that's all about communication right now. That's all we're doing. We're all on these things all the time, and we need some experts in that to kind of help us do it better. My opinion, not really a question.
I just want to clarify, Holly, I wasn't implying that there isn't benefit. The questions were asked more to prompt you to, until you get this person, these are the things that will be needed to sell this proposal to our community.
I knew you weren't.
Pat?
I have a few comments on that and maybe a question or two, but probably better to start off by saying, for those that don't know me, historically, and on other boards, am pretty critical of the quote-unquote heavier top and administration costs. I do respect it and understand the value there. We'd save a lot of money if we got rid of our superintendent, but that would not work out very well for us, right? So I understand that. That's normally the angle that you'll see me taking a look at things, but I will not be critical of this in any way or form. I came from a couple of different districts and different boards, and they were pretty awesome, but they were not Hollis Brookline level awesome. But the one thing that I've been frustrated by and critical of here is communication, and it's just so incredibly important. So I think, for the reasons that Holly and I think you're hitting the tip of the iceberg on the impacts you'll see from increased communication, because it's exactly along those lines. People can do what they're hired to do, but and I think something that Andy said, kind of really, two things you said. One is that the legal things that need to be communicated and all, but you also talked about the good news and the positive things. And sometimes, all of our time is valuable with everybody here, and sometimes it's hard and you lose sight of why we're here, what we're doing, and that is so incredibly important for me as a board member serving, but also as a taxpayer. And I think that we're just really, really behind where we could be if we had this kind of communication person. But I think, and I just want to make sure it's clear, it's not, I say that we're behind, but it's not because or to the fault of our SAU members. I think when you look at the extremely high expectations we already have on them, throwing a pandemic, throwing 4 different boards, 2 schools, 2 towns, all of that. And like Holly said, like, communication is changing, technology, it's so different now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I'm hugely supportive. I guess my question is, do surrounding, just in New Hampshire, I know other places in the country, I know they have these kind of positions. I'm curious if anybody local has them, because I thought that would be an awesome way to look at what they have, to not reinvent the wheel, but also for a potential person in the future to be able to collaborate with and see what's working, because it's ever changing. That was my question. Does that somebody else have?
Yeah, Pinkerton Academy has the position, the Hudson School District has the position, Salem has the position, and I actually have a superintendent's meeting tomorrow for this region, and that's kind of on the topic, because I think a lot of us are starting to look at this differently than we used to.
Yeah, and just one last thing I was going to mention too is just even Holly and our board on the co-op have been very kind and gracious and allowed for us to do like the HB highlights that we've talked about, and that was one of my favorite parts of being on previous boards, is what the communication specialists did and brought in students and highlight when you have these huge honors. And it didn't take a long time, but you bring them in at the very beginning of the meeting, and it highlighted on our documented, recorded minutes for the public to see, just how incredible things are for athletes, for scholars, and all of that. So I'm really excited. I hope that this is something that we can make work.
Anyone else? Yeah,
Just more of a comment. I think, when we think about, the capacity that's put on our administrators, and I've said this before, this is probably not going to be a surprise for the rest of my colleagues in Hollis, but I want my top administrators and my educators focused on that, to Holly's point. When we start redlining and we get really operational and can't be strategic, we lose value in that, right? Because our administrators, we need the strategic piece, right? So I think that's going to be really important. I want my top administrators focused on that. I don't want them focused on, especially communicating out to the public. That takes a lot of time and a lot of thought to make sure you're getting it right. So for every minute you're probably doing something else, public connection is probably taking 4 minutes to figure it out and make sure it's prepared and ready to go. So you're talking about a lot of focus there, and I'm confident that this resource will probably start out slow, but is going to be empowered more and more and work very closely with our top educators. And a level of trust will be built and understanding of what they have to communicate and how. I think what I'm interested in is, can we, if you're talking to some of these other districts that have this position, can we get some success stories from them? And from a standpoint of, what was the unexpected thing you got from this resource? I think that's going to help maybe with our proposal and our ability to justify the position. What were the things that they didn't see that they're enjoying out of this, right? And things that we can hopefully enjoy here. And I think that's going to be really important in terms of communicating and maybe changing hearts and minds about this piece. And I know a lot of the folks that have come up to me and asked me about this position, I always start out in saying, this is a conversation that is not new. We've been talking about this for years. I know it's new for you. I know it's new in the budget, but this is not a new thing. We didn't think this up last month and decided to throw it in. And I think Hollis is kind of unique, the district that is, because we are a renter, right? We're a landlord, right? We run a water system that feeds, I think, this building, as a matter of fact. When those things break, we've seen firsthand how it affects our top educators and how they have to spin and become water people, or come up with some kind of thing to help us get through a rental situation that has nothing to do with what they're trying to do, and the amount of time. So I'm, if you haven't guessed, pretty supportive of this role.
Well, even we had a woman come and public input today, and unfortunately I feel that we haven't, and not because we haven't communicated it well, but we haven't communicated what this communication specialist will do. Because the fear, right, the fear is that we're going to have less transparency and less availability to our administrators and teachers, and I think quite the opposite would happen because of that. And so we need to make sure that everyone understands that. The transparency, I think every one of our boards and our administration try as hard as possible to be transparent about everything we're doing. It just doesn't get out there because we don't have the ability to do it. So it would be nice to have someone be able to help all of us get that information out, and to make you guys and everyone else more available to people. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Insurance update, that's always fun.
Okay. It is good news this year. We received our GMR, and our guaranteed maximum rate for health insurance is 3.9%.
3.9?
3.9. And then our dental actually went down by a little over 1%. So good news on those fronts. So that's how we're building the budgets. And that will be made aware of that at each of the board meetings as well, so the communities will know that. In terms of the 4 Lund Lane Lease Committee, the committee has met. We've had some great discussions, As I think some of you are aware, we decided to reach out to an expert in commercial real estate. We were able to secure a gentleman in town who is doing it as a favor to the district. He's not charging us anything. He intends to have his report back to us by the end of this month, middle of this month, and then we have our next committee meeting scheduled for October 29th. Tom has a question.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Can I just back up to the previous one? I just wanted to give a quick update about the insurance committee. We haven't met as a full committee yet because we had a lot of difficulty getting some participants identified. But Kelly, Carrie, and I had a Zoom meeting with Health Trust, and there is a potential plan that might be of interest to the SAU as a whole. We're trying to get the numbers and some data and statistics. Short story. Our hope is to have a preliminary output to the committee members in October, before October's done, to determine whether we've got something to work with, and if we do, meet on it in the November timeframe to hit the December goal for having it available to bargaining units and things like that. But if anyone has any specific questions, in the meantime, feel free to contact me directly, and I'll give them a personal update if it's of interest to them. Thank you.
So it's the committee's hope to bring something to the SAU meeting in December to start the ball rolling, to maybe have at least a short-term lease in place, because right now the SAU is a month-to-month tenant at will, and would like to start getting to at least a document where there is security for both sides, so we're not out in the street, and all those animals we take care of still have a home. Yeah.
I was thinking that too.
So I thank Karen Jew, Liz Brown, and Rob Mann make up that committee along with me, and I thank them for all their assistance, and I look forward to bringing back the report to you. The next piece is I'm requesting permission later during deliberations to attend the National Superintendence Conference. I traditionally have not done this in the past. I traditionally don't tend to go many places. I do my professional development primarily in the state of New Hampshire. But in terms of looking at our strategic plan and that vision that I'm talking about, I think that we're setting the sights for the next 10 years. Some of the things that I'm looking forward to at the conference at a session, there are sessions on building the talent pipeline around how to cultivate assistant principals and all of that. And I think that's going to become critical because we have a very young administrative team, and I think the next few years in New Hampshire are going to become poaching. And we need to continue to always be able to backfill because there's not going to be enough bodies. So your climate, your culture, and your salary scale are going to become very important as we go after talent. You know, one of the things I talked a lot about is also at the conference is building capacity in rural districts for future-driven learning. And this goes into more of it's discussions around what did we learn from remote, and I'm interested to find out what other parts of the country learned and how we start to maximize that. Because if we are going to move to remote, we're a high-performing district, and maybe it's not necessarily a partnership with somebody else in New Hampshire, you know? Because again, kids can learn so much from different points of view. Building post-secondary options and impact. I think we're seeing that necessarily four-year college isn't right for everybody. So how do we start to guide children into either certificate programs, community college? How do we leverage community college to get into that four-year school, manage that debt? Because young people, and I speak on behalf of my three children, you know, the debt that they're coming out with is close to a mortgage. And how are you going to be able to accomplish everything you're looking to do with those massive bills? So how do we start to give our students different options? We also need to diversify our workforce. You know, we need to, again, as I said, start to look at time differently. You know, would we necessarily lose people, or would more people be looking for part-time jobs if there was a creative, flexible environment to be in? And you see corporate America moving to that, because instead of losing talent, they're saying, well, what can you give us? You know, and I think we need to do that as well. I really want to spend time looking at the early learning childhood toolkits, because there's two reasons. One, I've always been a huge supporter of a child learns better locally. You know, I think we have an outstanding curriculum, and when we have to place somebody out of district, that bothers me, because I'm not sure that that's what I want them to have. But I'm also looking at it and witnessing our own programs and seeing the difference it's making in those children's lives when you're getting them that early. And I know that sounds like an expense, but to me it also has potential cost avoidance. And I'll give you a real example. There are students in district now that 5 to 10 years ago we couldn't have serviced. And we would have started at age 6 with a $200,000 bill. And we would educate that child till age 21 at 200 plus whatever the increase is. So that money, to me, can be better spent, not only for the child that has that difficulty, but that cost avoidance now allows me to spend it on other programs for other students. And the last piece, and I think if you've ever gone and seen one of the high school athletic competitions for our special ed students, you see what they give back to our own students. The relationships that are formed from those programs are so powerful. You know, you see now, you know, college athletics caught on to this, and they're now giving roles to these children. And it has just exploded, you know, in the positive pieces for kids. And I look at that, and I think we can do more with our programming. And how do we share Hollis and Brookline resources so that, you know, we have two, what I'll call self-contained program, but they meet the needs of two different groups. So now, yes, we're transporting a child, but it's from Brookline to Hollis or Hollis to Brookline, depending on the program. And we're doing it because we can provide something that is going to be a monumental change in that child's life. And it's already happening under Amy's leadership. And then this one, how to use social media to tell the district story during a crisis. I should have got that 2 years ago, but you know, maybe there'll be another crisis before. I'm thinking that pretty confident.
If you have to sign up early for them, sign up early for that one.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to bring it to the board and officially vote on it is because it wasn't built into last year's SAU budget. So I would recommend, like we always do, the first option is to find the money in the operating budget. If it isn't found there, then we look at potential uses of grants, if there's a grant there that I can utilize, or that we would go into the unreserved fund balance, because the flight would be $221. It's in Nashville, Tennessee this year. It's from February 16th, which is a Wednesday, to Saturday the 19th. The hotels would be 4 nights. It's $258 a night for the conference rate, which is a discounted rate, which still seems really high to somebody who doesn't like to spend money. I checked the Uber from the airport to the hotel is about $40. Most of the conference fee, which is significant, $925, includes most meals. So in some ways that's a benefit. So it's an approximately $200 to $2,500 to attend the conference. I think the other piece is, as I learned from being on the New England Association, meeting in those separate small groups and talking with other superintendents. There are a lot of great things going on in this country, and bringing them back and stealing them, I was happy to share what we're doing. So later on tonight, I'm going to ask that you, if possible, you support that. And then Next is the.
Andy, isn't there money allocated for you for professional development and travel?
Yes, there is, and it's just that I'm not sure if that'll cover it, because this year I went to the New England one, which cost probably right around $500-something. So it's just.
So you think you may be exceeding budget. I don't want to imply that we don't budget for.
No, I don't want to do that at all. Our budget is well funded. It's just what typically happens is in some years, like occasionally we'll have an administrator leave at the end of the year when we do our payout for vacation days and things owed. Our budget becomes very narrow. We're fortunate that we have the unreserved fund balance that we can always dip into if we were to go into a negative. And that's why we always have a public hearing in December to kind of update folks on how that fund was used for the previous year. But it's just, I think it's easier to come and say this might happen, and if it never happens, that's great. But to your point, Tom, I think it's
Well, what I'm thinking of, especially in the context of what you're saying, if we have money currently in that we know is going to end up being unspent, if it's in the same category, I'd like to see authorization to utilize that money as opposed to treating it like an additional expense, because we have a pot of money that we rarely consume.
Right.
And I'd rather than it look like we're spending more than we normally do, I'd like to just redirect money that's already been allocated for staff development things.
Right. And I'm fine if the motion was to utilize funds in the operating budget or grants with the last resort of the unreserved fund balance. I just wanted to put it out there so that, it would be in the minutes tonight, so that in June, if we went into the unreserved fund balance because that put us over, it was made known well before it became an issue.
Thank you.
On your tables tonight, I had put out a handout, and I apologize for it not being in the packet, but we were just trying to finalize the dates, and we think we're there, but we're not totally there. Last year, we talked about that before we left, we had done what we called gap plans, learning plans, to address any areas that we felt as a concern. When we came back to the beginning of the school year, teachers reviewed those plans, talked from grade to grade to make sure everybody was on the same page. And now we're in the process of doing Ames Web and some of our assessments to kind of get benchmarks for where our students are at. But we feel, between Gina and I, that we're looking at some early release days. And the purpose of those early release days would be to reflect on the instructional practice, kind of, before we get too far, where are we? How have we done from what we talked about in August till the first one being November? Then, what do we have for our assessment data? What do the numbers tell us as far as, where is our grade 4 at with the state testing with Ames Web? How did our students do on their PSAT versus other years? Because we weren't, face-to-face the whole time. And then how do we reduce any identified learning gaps? So those would be the purpose of the early release days. So we're proposing 4 dates. And the dates were selected on a variety of factors, trying to look at trimesters, quarters ending, those type of things. But at the same time, looking at days that we felt would kind of hopefully not have a huge negative impact on families. So the first date we're proposing is Tuesday, November 23rd, which is before Thanksgiving break. We have Wednesday off because that's the exchange day for teacher conferences. So we would do our early release day. Faculty would stay Tuesday afternoon, get all their data and everything aligned, and then we would be off for break.
When are you proposing release times for these days?
What I'm proposing is that there be an early dismissal, like we did on Fridays last year.
So it's like about 12 o'clock for the co-op and 1 o'clock for the elementary.
Right. And then they use the rest of the afternoon for PLCs.
So 2 hours, basically.
Yeah, data review, those type of things. We'd be looking at Friday, January 14th, which is the Friday heading into Martin Luther King Day, figuring that maybe families could, if they were going to travel or do something as a family, then that would give them the ability to get on the road a little earlier. Wednesday, March 23rd, It's in the SAT window, but we talked to Tim and we think we're fine. We picked that because March is a very long month, and it's also, we're starting to head into kind of the final push for the school year, and we're really trying to close as many gaps as we potentially can, or at least identify remaining gaps for all the students we still have time with. You know, my biggest concern would be this year's seniors, because there's a finite amount of time. You know, I'm not as worried about as our kindergarten children, because I've got a lot of years to catch up. And then Friday, May 27th, which is the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, this would allow staff the professional development afternoon, and at the same time, hopefully benefit families if they were looking to have more family time. So we have that a little later on for a deliberative item, and that is actually when you could either do that when you break out into your boards, because we are going to break out into boards. The big piece about that is it is a transportation issue. So if we don't have the 3 districts agree to that, then we'll have a huge transportation cost on that one day, which I would just not do the early releases, because it would be exorbitant in terms of what, to run buses at noon for a district and then come back and run another set would be adding a whole expense that I couldn't support.
How will you handle, is this mandatory attendance by staff members?
Yes.
I'm just concerned with it being on all these holiday weekends, that you're going to have absences from staff members already.
Well, in the majority of our contracts, you can't take a day before to extend a holiday.
You can't be sick?
I mean, I can't say that you can't be sick.
I'm just concerned, are you shooting yourself in the foot at all by putting it on these days that are potentially high risk for absenteeism?
Well,
Or do we not have that problem?
I'll be honest, we had early release days all of last year. We did not have that problem. I will tell you what traditionally happens around Memorial Day weekend is, like starting now, I get requests because you have family weddings. So we'll have some people that will miss for those type of things because families will use Memorial Day, you know, for marriages and things like that. So there'll be some issues, but we don't traditionally have major issues. You know, Gina and I receive the attendance list every day. It's pretty steady.
Okay. Just wanted to put that on people's radar.
And at the same time, I was also trying to think of the lens through a family's eye, because some families will have to leave work early. And this might allow them to make it a little more tolerable, because they can use it to kind of create a family piece. Like the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, the Tuesday, Wednesday for us is not great attendance days to begin with, because if people are traveling, they're trying to get on the road before the traffic. So this way, to me, we almost check 2 boxes at once. We hit the needs of our families who have to travel, and at the same time, we get PD on academics.
Beth?
Yeah, just a quick question along those lines, because it will impact parents and all, and probably a little less at our co-op levels than it does at our little smaller human schools. But the one is only about just over a month away, so if it did pass tonight, how would you put that out and get that communicated?
It would go immediately into the principal's newsletters. We've learned that that's probably the highest read document that we send out, you know, because even now.
Yeah, but he's our communication specialist.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Just wanted to point out.
Yep.
I do agree. I mean, the Tuesday and the Friday, those all really coincide with holidays, but the Wednesday is right in the middle of the week and could be potentially harder for some families. But there's a lot more time for families being notified of that. But just curious. Most of us read those. Most of us read those, right?
Yeah, on that note, I had thought of this. Is it possible that I really enjoyed that video presentation. Is it possible that could be included in the principal's reports as well? Is that something that could be shared?
Yeah, we can put a link so that people go to the video. We are posting it to the.
The more people that could see that,
yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Erin?
I just had a procedural question. When we deliberate on our individual boards, should the motion be in support of it, should the other boards support it, or do we just decide on our own? I mean, should we have a stipulation in there that says if all three
Well,
or unless, or does it matter? I don't mean.
I don't know if it will matter, from the
Or are we
dynamics
all
of the
doing
board,
it
because,
together?
well, I don't see any of us need to go anywhere else.
Okay.
It's just a matter of opening a board, closing a board, so everybody will
Okay.
hear the discussion.
Okay,
Okay?
got it.
I'm sorry, are you saying that we'll stay here for our board breakouts?
I don't see.
Yeah, so we'll
Right.
just do it in the.
No,
presence of-
I would open a
On this
board.
topic only, or the other topics as well?
There'd be two topics,
Right, all
the
right.
transportation for the board, because we'll do two votes on transportation. One will be the SAU because it's the SAU's contract, but we'll do the board one because ultimately it's the board who could approve the dollars. So the vote at the board level is to approve the funding. And Don's motion is worded to take that into account, even though we don't know the exact down to the penny number yet.
So it's more of an integrated district meetings. It's not, we're not breaking out.
Right,
Okay.
right. No, and we've done this before.
Right. So I am going to call for a motion for us to go into recess, and just so I can say this for the public, the reason we're doing this is so that we can go to our individual boards, so that we can vote on both the bus contract, because it is a budget item, and the SAU governing board does not control the individual districts' budgets, and so we need to get it approved by the individual districts to approve a contract and the money that coincides with that, as well as the early dates, because again, the SAU does not work with that individual districts. We will come back in and, as an SAU district, vote on the contract, the bus contract as well, because as an SAU district, we do sign that contract. So, but we need the money allocated from each of the individual districts. So, with that in mind, may I get a motion to go into recess until the conclusion of the individual board meetings? By Beth, seconded by Kate. Thank you. And roll call vote.
Kate, aye.
Molly, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Rob, aye.
Can I?
Becky, aye.
Erin, aye.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye.
Amy, aye. Carol, aye.
Thank you. We are now in individual boards, and I'm off duty for a little bit.
The way I did it is, Ken, if you want to call your board to order first, and then you could take action on the two, and then once Brookline is done, you won't adjourn. We'll do Hollis, then we'll do the co-op, and then if everything goes as expected, we can then adjourn each of the boards.
Okay, so we'll call to order at 8:28 for the Brookline School Board. I'm going to put a motion on the floor and then we'll talk about it. So motion to award a 5-year, July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2027 transportation contract to Hollis Transportation of New Hampshire, DBA Hollis Transportation, Inc. Funding source is the general operating budget of each of the districts. So that's on the floor from me, Ken Haig. We need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so we only have the three of us. Go ahead, Erin.
No, you can start.
Nope, please. Oh,
I was just looking for the comment
okay.
here.
So
My
did you need a
overall
second?
thing, and my computer just died, but my overall thing is, that was a pretty glowing, and I mean, I remember going into this contract, and there was a lot of unknowns, and we kind of felt a little bit like our hands were tied, and we had some choices to make, but we knew that we had to make a change. And I think the big concern was being at this point and where we would be at this point. And I think that in my mind, I think considering the 2 years we've had, it's exceeded where I thought we could possibly be. And I think the increases and just the long-term costs, there wasn't anything that stood out to me as unreasonable.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with what Erin said. Again, as always issues with transportation, but it's been positive, and I think, again, through the last 18 months, it's been better than we could have expected.
Great. Yeah, and I guess I would just say, I did review the cost structure, felt the same around it being competitive and reasonable for us, being local. I know I asked about the one piece, but that's really, I mean, if that's the critique relative to where we were, I think they've done a really great job, and I don't want that to come off as anything more than just maybe continuous improvement. So I would agree. So hearing that, are we ready to do a vote? Mm-hmm. All right. Do we need a roll call because?
No, because you're.
No. So you want to do all those in favor? Carries 3-0. Okay. So the second one, I will put the motion on the floor again, is to improve the recommendation of the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction for early release days for the 2021-2022 school year as stated. So that's on the floor by me.
Second.
Second by Becky. Any discussion here? I guess we're the trendsetters on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Appreciate that it's only 4, because I know, you know that I always have
I
a
know,
little bit
like,
of
Ken's the
concern.
one that's gonna be
I'm
the
the one that
challenge,
always
so
has
I'll
the
let you
challenge. I get the quarterly thing. I think we knew this going into the school year, so this was
Yeah.
well understood. So I'm behind it. So ready for the vote? Okay, all in favor? Carries 3-0. And we're all set.
Terry, can I, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So I'm calling the Hollis School Board
Your turn
to
at the end.
order at, I'm sorry, I've lost track of the time, at 8:32 p.m. We'll do the same 2 motions, so I think I'll follow in Ken's smart footsteps. I'll read out the motion, ask for a second, and I'll try to also refer to the folks on the phone. So I move to award a 5-year, July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2027, transportation contract to Student Transportation of New Hampshire, doing business as Hollis Transportation, Inc. Funding source is the general operating budget of each of the districts.
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion? Folks on the phone?
Just to say that I think over the past several years that we worked with STA, they've, we've seen a lot and gone through a lot through COVID and everything else. And I think it has shown that, they've been a great partner. And I really like how Jeff kind of framed our engagement with his company. It really is a partnership and making sure, that students get to where they need to be safely and everything else. So I think they have really showed their colors, and I appreciate that. And although we've lived for many months with the contract draft, and, our district has seen it for quite some time, everything in it that I've seen looks in order. And I have absolutely no reservations for continuing our relationship with this provider.
Thank you. Brooke, Amy, Carol?
I echo Rob's sentiments. This is Carol. Yes, I agree as well.
Thank you, Amy.
No additional comment.
I just want to comment on the pricing structure. We had all shaken in our shoes, like Erin said, when this first came up. When the original Hollis Transportation let us know that they were going to sell their business, because we assumed that this is the 3rd largest bus, student transportation company in the country, that we would be held over a barrel come this time. And instead, what we've seen is perfectly reasonable recommended increases that fit well within the economics around us. And as everyone else has said, they've met and exceeded the promises they made 2 years ago. And I think it's the right price, the right service, so I'm happy to support it also. If there are no further comments, can we take a vote? All in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have to do the roll call. Thank you for reminding me. Amy?
Amy, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Rob?
Rob, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye. Thank you. And the second motion is to approve the recommendation of the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction for early release days for the 2021-2022 school year as stated.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
So I'm really glad this is coming up and we're looking at educational gaps. I know from talking to other folks in districts that weren't able to operate during COVID, it's a real problem. They have real deep educational gaps that they have to deal with. And I've always said, you know, the one thing of sitting on a board, we can't screw up a year because you will never get that year back. Those students move on. So this is, I think, really important that we're looking at this. And I also think it's going to be very important to be able to communicate to the community why we're doing this. So I would be very interested in the things that you uncover with this time that you're asking for us to approve. And maybe, I don't know if it's appropriate at the SAU level or just at our district level. It's going to help us be able to communicate to the community that we found this through this action that we're taking tonight. And these are the things that we uncovered. These are the things that we're doing to close these gaps. And I think that builds trust with the community, and I think it keeps that strategic thinking that we are thinking correctly in these terms, and you know, the community can support that ultimately. So.
I support. I support these early releases, and you know, we're looking at what, essentially 8 hours, and so I guess my only question is it enough? Is it enough time?
I think it's a decent balance. You know, we spent a lot of time in June looking at this data. We spent time before school started in those PD days coming up with a plan, and now it's more of just like, where are we? How do we be a little bit more strategic in a more focused fashion now that we have the kids and see the progress, or, you know, what the plans were? Are they working as we had hoped, and what do we need to tweak? So I don't think we need weekly, you know, so I think this is a good place to request.
Great, thank you.
Amy?
No, I support the early releases.
Thank you. Carol, do you have anything?
No, just a word of support for timing and structure. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So if there's no other comments, let's take our vote. All in favor of this motion?
Roll call.
By roll call?
You're getting it.
I'm not going to get this. Amy, go ahead.
Amy, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Rob, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are still in session, correct?
You're going to stay in session, yep?
Okay, so at this point, I place a call meeting of the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School Board to order at 8:38 p.m. I will follow Ken's suit and put the motion on the floor to award a 5-year from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2027 transportation contract to Student Transportation of New Hampshire, doing business as Hollis Transportation Inc. Funding source is the general operating budget of each of the districts. I need a second. Second by Kate. Is there any discussion? Really?
Well, I just can say one
Oh,
thing.
Beth and Tom. Oh, hi.
Hello down there. No, I just was gonna mention, you know, I know the timing and everything. I'm glad that it came about it. It's hard, especially my small human at the times and all. And I know they're working out, but it has, much to high schoolers' dismay, seem to be working out very well, holding the back parking lot and allowing the buses to roll out, because that reduces the traffic along these main roads in Hollis and Four Corners. And it sounds like, I mean, they've really across the boards, not just transportation, but administration, has done a great job brainstorming. It's a lot of moving parts for that, so I'm glad we're getting into it. I support, I mean, it's been a good experience.
Mr. Solon?
Just to understand, if this contract was not approved, what would be the recourse for the upcoming year? There's a rollover kind of thing?
There would be a rollover, or you could reject the rollover and go out to bid.
And if it rolled over, do you know what the rates would be?
The rates are going to be the same as.
I think they're actually higher.
Yeah, right, because if you take out the bus.
No, it's just, we're actually saving money over next year.
Right.
That was what I wanted to confirm.
Yes.
And, nope, that's it. The only thing I'll put on the table, I don't know how it works with this contract, but if the situation that Ken brought up persists, I don't know whether there would be support for investing in tracking so that parents could real-time see when the buses were coming.
I can tell you that during our discussion, we talked a little bit about real-time tracking, and that's something that's just going away in the industry.
It's going away?
It's going away because most people, again, started out looking for that and then moved away from it from a corporate stance like schools and that, so they're getting no real questions for that. I suppose if the board asked, they could look into it again, but when we had that discussion.
No, I was just a little surprised. I thought that I'm behind the curve. I thought the trend was still growing.
No, I think the trend has turned just to the app on the cell phone. Because my child has their cell phone, and I can put the app on and track them anytime I want.
Got it.
I mean, I came from a district we used that, and
Yep.
it was really big, and it was a thing, but what we found there too is for the expense, it was really awesome on snow days or delays where the bus is running late, but it wasn't like a daily,
Right.
Because once you find that window and find what works, you just don't use it as much. But it is super cool, but expensive.
Anyone else? Krista?
I just want to say, I think this is a win-win. I think going to a 5-year contract, and certainly the last 2 years being going down from a 4% increase to a 3% increase, it helps us to budget for 5 years. It helps us to save some money, and it allows them to go and change the buses over. We're trying to get all the buses to 77 passenger buses, and if they need to get loans and if they need to do those things, it gives them the ability to do it. So I think it's a win-win situation, and I support it.
I just want to say the same thing as Tammy, because I was part of the original. We were very concerned, going from a small local business to the big bus company, and I think that they, for those that were involved at the very beginning, I think they surprised us by this, and I think that they've done a great job. They've done a lot for the drivers as far as the accommodations, which has made a big difference, I think, and I think our bus drivers that we've had a lot and for a while, the ones that are still there are very happy, and the new ones that have coming in, at least they have the older ones have something to tell them that has been improved since their working conditions in the past. So I think they've done a great job.
Okay.
I was going to say I couldn't possibly improve on everything else.
Me too, I'm with you. So, all those in favor? That's unanimous for the co-op for 6. Okay, and I will put the next motion on the floor to approve the recommendation of the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction for early release days for the 2021-2022 school year as stated. I need a second? Second by Beth. Is there any comment on this?
Just one super quick question on it. I know I asked before about it. So the plan is to put it out in the principal's emails, but just to throw it out there, just to add one more thing for you to think about, but maybe an email from the SAU, just because the only reason I say that is that can get lost so easily.
Yeah, I agree.
I, of course, read every single communication from all of my kids' principals, but I actually miss plenty. I'm sure I miss plenty. So that would actually really throw me off as a mom if I didn't get that up front. So it might be something to consider as a standalone, from the SAU, because we definitely pay attention to those emails. But I absolutely support this. I mean, these are great scheduled check-ins.
Do we actually, typically in the past, I know we put days off on the calendar. Did we put early release days?
We haven't had early releases until we went through COVID, and I'm not sure I would support them in the future, maybe quarterly or something like this, but because again, we did get a very positive response from staff as far as addressing curriculum. So it may be something where we look at the master calendar next year and put some built in so parents would have more time. But these are the ones we specifically talked about related to COVID.
Sure. I was just thinking in terms of, I know there definitely are some old school parents out there who do print out that calendar and stick it on the wall so that they can see when kids have days off.
Yep.
I didn't know if there was benefit to actually throwing the early release days in there as an amended
Oh, yeah,
calendar, put it
yeah.
out with an email and allow people to
Good thought.
print it out.
And when you do put information out, put the times with it, because some people don't know when early release is.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about the logistics of that. That actually is a different dismissal for every single school. So, is it less confusing to have everything in one communication? Is it less confusing to say, these are the early release specific dismissal times released by the school? I think you could say either one is more beneficial for a variety of different reasons, but it is kind of confusing because based on four corners, that sort of dictates everything.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0, I think. Yes, okay. The co-op board is done.
Right. Since you're still, if you would like to
I'd
adjourn.
love to have a motion to adjourn the co-op meeting. That would be moved by Kate, seconded by Beth. All those in favor? 6-0. And the co-op adjourns at 8:46.
Ken, you want to go next?
Sure. Motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion to adjourn. Need a second? All in favor? 8:46, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Tammy?
Move to adjourn the Hollis School Board. All in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call.
You need a second.
Amy, aye.
Tammy,
Second.
Rob, aye.
Brooke, aye.
We're adjourned.
That was the fastest co-op meeting I've ever been to.
All right.
Don't get used to it.
Oh, no, I didn't.
And we're back.
That's it.
All right, we are going into deliberations for the SAU to see what action the board will take regarding the superintendent's attendance at the national conference. I need a motion to approve the superintendent's attendance at the 2022 national conference
So moved. Second.
by Tammy and Becky, seconded by Becky.
I move to amend.
Yeah, Tom wants to.
I'd like to add with funding to come from existing budget or, what do you want, or grants?
Operating budget?
What's the correct wording of where you want it to the funding come from?
Operating budget, or grant opportunities,
Or the unreserved fund balance.
or unreserved.
Budgets, grants, and/or unreserved fund balance. Fund balance, okay?
I'll second Tom's amendment.
Okay,
Are we voting on the amendment? Is that
we're
what-
going to have to vote on the amendment. Roll call, is there any discussion on the amendment? Roll call vote on the,
I'm sorry, what does what does it serve?
Pardon me?
What does it serve? Like, what value does it add to the?
Because it lets the people know that this is not going to be an additive amount to any existing budgets.
Okay.
okay. Beth?
Kate, aye.
Holly, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Rob, aye.
Ken, aye.
Becky, aye.
Erin, aye.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye. Amy?
Amy, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Where'd Carol go?
Here.
Oh. Hi, Carol. Okay, so the amendment passed. So we have a motion. Can I get a motion now on,
You've got the motion.
so we have it,
Whether
it's on,
discussion
it's live.
or
Now we're voting. Any discussion on this?
I just want to say, I really hope it's a nice experience and that you get to learn a lot of really great things.
I hope you come back.
I was gonna say,
I hadn't thought of that, Tammy.
don't bring your resume.
It's really nice.
Like your resume.
Like, we don't need you moving to Georgia or something. Like, no.
With a guitar on his back. Beth?
I was just gonna say, that's like one thing I really missed pre-pandemic and other boards is attending. I went to, you know, not only my professional, but as a board member, and our superintendents in the past that attended, and it's just such a neat experience because people that go to these are there because they're so passionate about public education, and the ideas that you come up with are just like things you would never think of, and it's just kind of neat to see what's working. So I'm excited for this.
Watch out for the rolling bars in Nashville. They're causing a lot of accidents.
So board members can go? Andy, would you love that?
I'll get a whole floor here.
With a rolling bar for you.
In a different hotel.
Okay, let's take.
You made him cry.
Let's take a vote.
Holly, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Bye-bye.
Can I?
Becky, aye.
Erin, aye.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye.
Amy, aye.
Carol?
Okay, motion passes. Unanimous. Okay, now we are going to see what action the board will take regarding the SAU transportation contract. I need a motion to award a 5-year contract, July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2027, transportation contract to Student Transportation of New Hampshire, doing business as Hollis Transportation, Inc. Funding source is the general operating budget of each district.
So moved.
Rob moved. Tammy, second?
Sure.
Okay, any discussion?
I'm just curious, it's Transportation Company of New Hampshire and not of America? So they're each individual companies?
Yes.
So
It's kind of like a franchise.
what's the relationship, do you know?
It's.
Is it a franchise?
Yes, that'd be the easiest way to.
Yeah, that's what I was,
Yep.
easiest way to describe
Yep.
it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote, starting.
Kate, aye.
Holly, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Bye-bye.
Can I?
Becky, aye.
Erin, aye.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye.
Amy, aye.
Carol? Great, thank you. Okay.
Do we have it on public?
And we wanted to talk about Don McMillan,
Yep.
so.
Many of you know our recording secretary, Dawn McMillan. She does all of our boards, co-op, budget committees, all of it. The last time Dawn had a raise was in 2016. And she has requested that we look at that. I did some research. In 2011, she made $17 an hour. In 2016, we moved her up to $20 an hour. If we had been doing basically a 3% increase over those 5 years, that would put her at a little over $23. So I'm proposing a salary of $23 an hour for her to continue as our recording secretary. She would like to stay with us very much long-term. She enjoys it. She's just completed her 13th year. And I can tell you, as somebody who sees a lot of minutes for a lot of different places, she does an outstanding job. And I think from my standpoint, when I have to go back and search things and find things, the benefit is just amazing. So I'm recommending that we increase the board secretary hourly wage from $20 an hour to $23 an hour, starting with our next meetings.
So I would like a motion to increase Don McMillan, our board secretary's, what do we call that, salary? No. Hourly rate to $23 per hour.
So moved.
Tammy and Beth. Was it Tammy or?
Yeah, Tammy and Beth.
Tammy and Beth, okay. Any discussion?
I don't know if we could do this without her. I just don't know if we could do the caliber of records keeping and documentation of our meetings without Dawn. She's incredibly skilled. She's utterly dedicated. I don't know why she stays with us. It's such hard work, but she does a tremendous job.
Outstanding.
And just to echo that when we have our non-public, she supports that step too. And as the secretary, again, for co-op board, she supports me, helps me, puts up with me. I mean, she really is a tremendous help in that, so I support this.
Thank you. Anyone else?
She's currently making 20.
Yep.
And we're just moving her $3.
This is only for the SAU position, correct? We have to do something
We-
similar with any other boards that
Correct.
utilize her services?
Correct.
Okay. How many hours does she put in total? Is there any risk that she is approaching a level where she would be an employee? Have to be brought in as an employee?
No, not at this time, because you're looking at, they're all separate entities.
So is she a contracted employee?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we're just approving her for the SAU board, and then next meeting would be Co-op, then Brookline, then Hollis.
Okay.
So these are contracted services, or does she actually have a contract that she holds with?
She has an hourly rate.
So she submits an invoice and gets a 1099?
She submits invoices once the draft minutes are presented.
Right.
Right, I just,
Could Beth technically make a different contracted rate from each different district?
She could. We've always kept her consistent. And we're not the only district she does.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Doesn't she do the town of Nashua?
she does stuff outside the SAU.
She
SAU
does.
41 is what you're saying?
Yes, she is a recording secretary for a number of entities.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Beth, aye. Kate, aye. Holly, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Rob, aye.
Ken, I.
Becky, aye.
Erin, aye.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye.
Amy, aye.
Carol, aye.
Thank you, unanimous. Okay, we do not have a need for a non-public, so I need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Do you want the process?
Oh, my gosh, I am
Yes,
so.
why not do it again?
She did it, and I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Look at all those
It was
notes.
a great discussion. I know, I got some suggestions. We got a little, we went a little long, but it was during our presentation of the district goals and objectives, and, but I think it was very valuable. And Andy's details were really well laid out, and I think the board found it to be very worth the time. And if anybody's wondering about the mini meetings, Brookline came in at 4 minutes, Hollis came in at 6, and Co-op came in at 8. So it was pretty close.
Well, divide that up minutes per member, and you might be disappointed.
Yeah. Erin, thank you very much for doing that, and I'm sorry that I did not do that. I know it's a
Madam
pain.
Chair, my motion stands.
Rob, Beth, second. Roll call.
Beth, aye. Kate, aye. Holly, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Krista, aye.
Only because I've been warning for years. Rob, nay.
Wow.
Becky, aye.
Erin, aye.
Tom, aye.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye.
Get the calculator out.
Carol, aye. All right, thank you, everyone.